Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to the race reaction. And he said preview for some reason for the 2024 Hungarian Grand Prix. How did we like that one, chat? I hope you're all well. Everyone at home is having a good day. A good day. Yeah, that was interesting. Look, I've put the poll up as usual. Rate the race. Good, great, average, okay, bad. 49% say good. I would actually put it again. I would just put it between good and average / okay. I think strategy, intrigue, which I always enjoy, some action in the field, but really it was all about team radio and really angry drivers. So Stuart's apparently having some technical issues, so hoping to fix those shortly, so I'll bring him in just a second. But you can vote on the poll. Don't forget to drop a like as well on the stream. 261 of you here. Please do subscribe as well if you're new. I'll do some shout outs for subs a little bit later as well. But yeah, I would say it was an okay race. It wasn't a thriller, but enough to talk about, that's for sure. There is plenty to get into today. There is an investigation ongoing with the stewards. Max Verstappen is there at the moment. I think Lewis Hamilton will be there as well to discuss what happened at turn 1 late on between those two. So I'll keep an eye on the FIA page and hopefully we'll get some news whilst the stream is on. But at the moment, he finished P5. Of course, Oscar Piastri getting his first career race win. Lando Norris second place and third place for Lewis Hamilton, who's really hit a real hit of form here for Mercedes once again. So that's great. But yeah, I really enjoyed the strategy intrigue, and I think again there was enough to keep us kind of engaged, I would say. I'm going to say this as well. Keep it civil in chat. I don't want a load of falling out. You know, that's not what we do in this community. Obviously, we have differing opinions, but that's absolutely fine. I'm looking forward to getting into this. So we'll start by just getting on to, I guess, the start of the race. We'll start with McLaren. Stuart will be with us shortly. We'll start with McLaren. This all kind of kicked off at the start, didn't it? What Lando Norris described in his post-race interview as a difficult shift to second. So had a good launch, difficult shift to second. That allowed Oscar Piastri to get alongside him despite the squeeze. He then took the lead into turn 1 and really looked like he was never going to look back. A really good drive in the first half of that race, and for the most part, I would say, throughout for Oscar Piastri. There were moments, he had a couple of moments, didn't he? One at turn 11 where he went wide, which cost him quite a lot of time, and a kick up of the gravel as well a little bit later in the race when he was being or trying to catch Lando Norris. He was trying to chase down Lando Norris, and that sort of cost him a little bit of time there. But he did get the win, let through by Lando Norris. We'll get into all of that in just a moment, but I will say, perhaps I'm reading into this weirdly, but shades of 1998 Australia there for McLaren again. DC and Mika Hakkinen. Maybe an arrangement pre-race of whoever's at turn 1 first gets the win, and then letting drivers go after the first round of stops, or whatever the arrangement was. Just felt a little bit like that, the way it was all handled as well, from what we saw of sort of letting him go on the start-finish straight. But yeah, Oscar Piastri is a Formula 1 race winner, but it's not come without controversy. And I feel a little bit sorry for him, actually, to be honest. A point that I've seen made in chat and on social media, and I think it's a very fair point. Neither driver did anything wrong today. Not a thing. Oscar Piastri, apart from a couple of little mistakes, one more costly than the other, drove extremely well. Lando Norris drove extremely well. The position they ended up in was they were put in that position by the team, and this is something that I think is important, and I don't feel is going to get spoken about enough. There are two things for me. You could throw 3 in with the start for Lando getting a difficult second phase of the start, but there are 2 things here that triggered all of this. The first one, as Oscar was saying there, number 1, was Oscar Piastri's mistake. The second one was another poor decision on strategy by McLaren. And we're going to get into that now. So how are you, Stuart? Are you working all right? Are we good? Well, still no, Stuart. We'll see. Just interrupt me if you do get in, Stuart. Let me know. No, we've got buzzing, but no Stuart. So I'll mute you for a moment. Sorry, Stuart. Second time in 3 races we're having technical issues on our strategy. No, definitely still nothing, Stuart. Let me just check that you're all set up on my end properly. Sorry, everybody, with it's Discord again, I think. And nope. Just got buzzing at the moment, so I don't know what's going on there with Stuart. I have muted it on stream. If you can hear the buzzing, I do apologise. Let me know, and I'll try and go quiet again. But yeah, that was really the big moments for me. Was the mistake from Oscar Piastri, which brought Lando Norris into play, I guess you could say. And the second one is the bad strategy call from McLaren to pit Lando Norris first. And it's actually a baffling strategy call. I will say this, quite a frustrating strategy call, because I was watching the timing screens, and I know that I don't have all the data that the teams have. I completely appreciate that. I'm not an idiot. I'm aware. But I was watching the timing screens, and I understood that, Lewis Hamilton was quicker, but they had a lot more margin than I think maybe they realised or they feared. Maybe they feared it was going to be less than that and Hamilton might pick up the pace again. Because I think they had a good sort of 7 or 8 second buffer before it would have been a concern. I know you've got to factor in potential slow pit stops, but it was just really weird to me that they decided to bring Norris in to cover Hamilton, who wasn't really a threat, and then put Oscar Piastri in a position where he has to go longer, which means he's undercut by his teammate, which means we've got to have all this faffing on team radio. All very, very strange. And I don't understand. Well, I do understand it. It's one of those weird ones for me. It was and this will be a contradiction, but stick with me. It was a bad decision, but a kind of understandable one in a way, if you know what I mean. And I'm just really not sure whether, and I'm not buying, by the way, this thing from Nico Rosberg that McLaren have never been in this position before, and so they have got to sort of get on top of strategy. We've got to cut them some slack, because they have been in this position before plenty of times of McLaren. I know personnel might be different, but they know how to run strategy at McLaren, so it's all very strange. I'm not quite sure why they made the call overall, but that's what gave them all the trouble, and that's what caused all the problems on the team radio. Lando Norris being ordered quite firmly to let Oscar Piastri through, which, if you're talking fair, a lot of people like to talk about fair. It probably is the right thing to do, but you can completely understand why Lando Norris is frustrating. Irene says, understandable how? I mean, I've just explained it. That the fact is, they're looking at Lewis Hamilton and can see that they see him as a threat. So pitting him first is an understandable decision, but perhaps not the right one, because I don't think Hamilton was the threat that he thought, if you know what I mean. I don't think he was the threat that McLaren thought. So can you tell I'm trying to tackle technical issues whilst talking? But that's kind of the point I'm getting at. It's not, it's one of those things that it's a bad decision, but I can understand why they've come to that point when they're trying to protect Lando Norris. But ultimately, you have to remember as well, and this is the other side of it, if Oscar Piastri is still 3, 4, 5 seconds up the road without that mistake, Lando Norris isn't able to undercut him because there's not enough time. So it's sort of it's 2 or 3 parts to this. Lando Norris saying the start is a big part of it, and him losing the position. Oscar Piastri making the mistake, and then McLaren making what seems like a poor decision on covering Lewis Hamilton, who I don't ever think was ever a threat to McLaren today. But you have to also put yourself in the team's position as a strategist and say, look, what if we have a sticky front left wheel, which a few teams had issues with today on their tyres? What if we have a sticky wheel that means that we have a 6, 7, 8 second stop, and suddenly we've got Oscar or Lando behind Lewis, and suddenly you've got this situation, as we've seen today, where it's quite difficult to overtake at times, that they might have to battle out there and lose even more time, and that could cost them. So I can see from a strategist point of view, but looking at the timing screens as an idiot sat at home staring at my multi-viewer, I wasn't convinced it was the right call at the right time. Because I suppose as well, if Oscar doesn't make that mistake, they can also do the double stack, can't they? It's really intriguing. And I've seen a few people as well on social saying that Lando should have probably let Oscar through a little bit sooner, and then if he lets him through sooner, he can fight back. But if your team gives you the instruction to let your teammate through, it's unlikely they're going to allow you to fight for the last 10, 15 laps for the lead. Bearing in mind that he'd already been told, Lando, that sort of prior to that situation, that he can fight. I think he said they can fight the papaya car, I think is what he said. You can fight your teammates, but only until the mid-40s, which is when the second round of stops would have been. So perhaps after that, the fight would have been called off anyway. So I'm sort of seeing it from Lando Norris's position in a way. Yes, he's inherited the lead because of a mistake from the team, but Oscar drove so well, and it would seem unfair, and I know the world isn't fair, don't say it, somebody will, but it just would seem just unfair that because of a team cock-up, Piastri, who, can I also point out, has spent plenty of time over the last 12 months or so jumping out of Lando Norris's way when instructed to. Not for a win, of course, but it would be unfair that he didn't get that win after driving so well. It's such a complicated... People seem to think that everything's black and white in Formula One, and it's just such a complicated thing with so many things. That factor into it. Like I say, I've picked out 3 there. Let me know what have we got in chat. I mean, we've got Lando Norris saying the second part of his start was bad, a difficult shift up to second gear. Then you've got Piastri's mistake and the pit stops or the strategy. Is there something else I'm missing in there that maybe is another factor? Because that's three factors in one incident already. I didn't like the team radio. I do think it's very telling that Aussie P, as we like to call him, was incredibly calm, very considered on the radio from what we heard, and wasn't kicking off at every opportunity. So I'll give him that. He was very level-headed about it all. But I'd be intrigued to know what would have happened had he crossed the line second. Whether that would have been the same situation, I don't know. Kaori, thank you very much for becoming a new member. Really appreciate your support. As always, Kaori, it's great to have you here. So Ken Charlotte, the checkered flag is black and white. That's true. That is something that is black and white in Formula One. I'll let you off that one. And the 1998 Arrows was as well. So there you go. He's far behind Max. Every point counts, says Kuma. Yeah, but also... That's another factor actually you could throw in there from the team's position or from a team's point of view. This is the Constructors' Championship. They're probably not looking at the drivers. This is where the money's paid. So it's a 1-2 either way. So swapping the drivers around makes no difference to them points-wise. But of course it hits Lando hard. But you're also relying on Max Verstappen to drop 60, 70, 80 points, whatever it is, between now and the end of the season. And even with weekends like this, he's not going to have these every week. So I just don't see that championship lead disintegrating. But it's a fair point. You've got to give the driver who's hiring a championship as many points as possible. But I just don't think a team cock-up is... And does Lando want to win a race because the team cocked up? Does he? Probably. I'd want to win a race. Is Stuart working? Have we got some success?
If it's good quality enough for your stream.
It's not the best quality, but it's all right. We can hear you. It doesn't sound like a microphone. Are you using something different?
I am currently on my phone, which is...
Have you called?
So, I've had to switch the Discord off my phone, and if this is not good enough, you'll have to let me know, because my microphone decided to just do that buzzing sound at you at the last minute.
So, does this mean for the first time ever when I say Lincoln calling London, we can finally use that? Chat will let me know. Chat say that it's a few percent not the best, but we can hear you. So we'll see how we go. I can hear you, so that's all right. So that's got to be a good thing. But we can't help technical issues, can we? It's just one of those things. But I was waffling away as best I could about all of that.
I was half listening while I was vaguely troubleshooting. I've reopened all my things. And we're talking about the McLaren situation. Where do we land on that? And I will join you and tell you something incredibly insightful, I'm sure.
Well, the kind of point I was making for the last few minutes was ultimately that there were three major factors in this. Two of them, I think, were the bigger ones. But there was Lando Norris's start, which allowed Oscar Piastri through. Lando saying poor second phase of the start. You've then got Oscar Piastri's mistake, which allows Lando Norris to come back at him. And then you've got the McLaren cock-up on strategy. My overarching point was I understand from a strategical point of view the team want to cover Lewis Hamilton, but I wasn't convinced looking at the timing screens that maybe that was necessary. But that's where I land on that.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that. I think for the most part, this was Piastri's race. He had a great start. He pulled away as he needed to and was managing the race. And this is all in this problem, if you want to call it that, is all in the lap of McLaren, really. And I could see why Norris was aggrieved. He's only won one race, despite trying very hard over the last few years to get a race win. He knows he's in the title fight to an extent with Verstappen. I mean, he seems to be the only one sort of approaching being in a title fight with Verstappen, and giving up a second win is hard, and it shouldn't have been on him to do it. He shouldn't have been put in that position. They should have just pitted Piastri early. I don't know why they seem to think we're not covering Hamilton, but Lando's covering Hamilton, so we'll put him first, undercut you, swap them over. That seemed to me to be a daft thing to do. But I think this undercut's a thing we've been saying for a few weekends now, where McLaren, I think, are the leaders in performance at the moment. But as a team, they're not championship winning team in terms of management and leadership and strategy and getting everything sorted out. They've definitely thrown away a few wins for Lando, as a team, including Lando himself. But between them, they should have won a few more races probably this year than they have. And I think that's the kind of thing that Red Bull won't do if they've got the car with the best performance. So yeah, I think a cock up from McLaren. I think it's for the best they did swap in terms of moving forward from this together as a team and staying harmonious. I think if they hadn't swapped back, they would have had to manage those two drivers in terms of trusting each other, in terms of working together. Kind of what Lando's engineer was saying, like this is eventually going to haunt us for the rest of the season if we don't swap back. So yeah, if that's vaguely what you were saying, that's where I am too.
Yeah, I think we're landing in about the same place. It's and that's a great point you make as well, by the way. This is, if there is going to be a championship fight here, it's okay saying, oh, what if Lando loses the championship by 6 points? Yeah, that would be frustrating. And we'll all look back at this and go, well, that was stupid, wasn't it? But at the moment, in this fight where you've got Perez, who, even though he had a good race today, we'll get to him in a bit, is nowhere. Verstappen's up there fighting on his own. You've got two McLarens. If you've got two McLaren drivers working together, you've got a great chance of taking this fight to Max Verstappen. Even though I'm not convinced we're going to get a drivers' championship fight, having two drivers working harmoniously is going to be a best chance of getting it. Because then when we get to, and I think I said this to, it was either you or Jonty in DMs, but when we get to, let's say, Mexico, for argument's sake, or Brazil, somewhere like that, towards the end of the season, and let's say the championship fight is on, let's say Lando has clawed this back, and Piastri's leading in Brazil, let's say, that's the probably better one, leading in Brazil, Lando's second, 5 seconds behind, Piastri is marginally quicker, McLaren can say, Oscar, you need to let Lando through for the championship, and if he goes, oh, well, I don't want to do that because it's going to give up 6 seconds, they can say, let's go back to Hungary and what he did for your first win. Whereas if you don't make that swap, perhaps Oscar's better than that. Maybe he would still move out of the way, but there is always a risk that he goes, well, he didn't move out of my way for me in Hungary, so why should I move for him? Think Webber, Vettel, multi 21 or whatever it was, all stem from the fact that Mark Webber made Vettel's life difficult in Brazil 2012.
Yeah.
So you need harmonious teammates if you're going to, and if you've got two drivers who can take the fight to Verstappen, use them, keep them happy. But also you've got to remember that by asking Norris to hop out of the way, you are technically pissing one of them off a little bit. So I don't think there's any way a team can ever keep two drivers that are competitive in a competitive car 100% harmonious. But you've got to try the best you can.
Absolutely, and they both clearly want it. They've shown multiple times this season they're not afraid to fight with each other. They're not afraid to go at each other on track. I think off track they've been they seem to have been pretty good together. They are one with the team at trying to push this team forward. But as that continues, they need to continue that mindset. And I think that includes things like at the start, perhaps. If we look back to Silverstone last year, we saw the Mercedes working pretty well together to make sure they started on the front row, they exited the second few corners together. They covered the track together, and then later on worked out who was going to win and fighting that. But actually, if you've got the front row covered, I think there is something to be said about just making sure you've got those front two positions covered, overlap one, and then working out the fight. I know turns 1 and 2 are probably at most tracks are going to be the best place to grab the lead if you happen to be the person in second place. But while maybe there is a chance that Lando could move towards Verstappen in the championship, I think the real championship fight, and the one that I think is genuinely on now, is McLaren versus Red Bull. I mean, 100%. They clawed 27 points on Red Bull even before Verstappen may or may not get a penalty on this race. And I think that's where they need to focus, and they need to make sure that everyone's going to get wins where the wins are available. But that's where that's where they're fighting, and they can't be losing points fighting over each other in the future. So yeah, I do think they can take the title this year. I think it's definitely on. I think they've got the best car, and unlike Red Bull, they are finishing in high places every single race together. They haven't got a sort of Perez hanging out the back.
And that's the key, isn't it? I think Red Bull, still got a fairly healthy lead in the constructors, 51 points at the moment. There is a potential penalty coming for Verstappen as well, which might swing that another 2 points down off of Red Bull. But I think in the drivers, Max is pretty comfortable. We've seen this before with other drivers. That kind of lead is not unassailable, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. I don't see Max finishing 5th, 6th place every weekend between now and the end of the season for a big swing. So you never know, of course, you never know. But I think the constructors is definitely where the fight is. And I would argue that on current form, with that car arguably the quickest at the moment, and if you keep Norris and Piastri happy and they keep working well together and keep picking up the points, I think there's an argument to say they're possibly bordering on favourites for the constructors unless Perez picks it up, or a Lawson or a Ricciardo or a Mika Hakkinen, whoever's going to get in that second Red Bull if they drop Perez, turns up and performs. I think you could argue they're up there as possible favourites. But chat, just one question I wanted to ask you, Stuart, and I'll put it to chat as well, and I'll read some super chats in a second while they get their answers in. But if, and I think I know the answer, because I think we'd all play it the same way. If this was later in the season and Norris was 10 points behind Max Verstappen in the championship and he was leading and Oscar Piastri second, do you think the switch still happens? Because I don't think it does. So it's a lot of hypotheticals there, I know, but...
Set that one up again, just to make sure I understood correctly.
So if this happens in... Let's give Brazil as the example again. It happens in Brazil.
Yeah.
Lando Norris is 10 points behind Max Verstappen in the drivers. Oscar Piastri's leading. Norris is leading, and they ask Norris to let Oscar Piastri to go. Does that swap still happen? I think we all think the answer is no, but I'll throw it out there anyway.
No, I think the answer is no, and I think that would be really tough for Piastri. If we're assuming the same situation, this is the potential for his first win. He's established himself in the first 2/3 of the race. No, because Norris has clearly established himself as a title contender. It's end game for the season, and I think that's just how it works. And I think tough beans. But I also think in that situation, they would be within their rights to undercut Piastri with Norris anyway. To be fair, I think they could easily say to Piastri, "Look, this is where we are in the championship. We have a shot. We might not have it next year. We have to favour Norris." And I think Piastri would have been aware of that at the start of the race.
So a couple of people, as they do on the internet, sort of getting a bit snippy in the chat. But just to make the point, there was a serious point to that question. It says to me that right now the drivers is not on McLaren's mind. Yes, the gap is bigger, but if they were really thinking drivers' championship, they wouldn't have made the swap today. That was the point I was trying to make. All right, badly, but I'm asking a question. You don't have to get arsey about it. Not you, Stuart. Unless you are, I might not be else. Everyone's arsey today in F1. You might be foul. Who knows? But no, that's the point I'm making. Is it's about the constructors for McLaren. So that's why I wanted to weigh that question in there more than anything. It wasn't just to be an idiot. It was to make a point that's obviously gone over people's heads. But yeah, that was all it was. That was all it was. So it's all about the constructors and not the drivers. But again, if it's closer, that even if you make it closer today, 10 points in it, they're not going to swap the drivers around. They're going to let Lando take that win. So, but as I think was it Warren said in chat that this was about getting Piastri's first win out of the way, because that can be a bit of a monkey on your back, can't it, for drivers? Look how long it took Lando, bless him, Lando no wins, as people are calling him on social media, because, ha 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 ha, lol. Look how long it took him to get that, and how much that affected him, all those second places, not quite getting the win. So just getting that out of the way is a good thing for Piastri, and I have no doubt whatsoever. And I'm a Piastri fan, so there's some bias here, and I appreciate that. I'm not really a Norris fan, so I get that maybe I'm not going to give a completely unbiased view here, but I do believe that if Norris needs Piastri in 2, 3, 4, 5, even next weekend, Piastri will be out of the way and help him, no doubt whatsoever. And that doing that today confirms that. He won't argue with the team. He'll just hop out of the way. He might push his luck a bit and wait a few extra laps, because I do feel like Lando should have made the swap sooner. But but chat overwhelmingly saying no. But just as well, Stuart, that was the other question. Do you think Norris would have been allowed? Because a few people on socials have seen saying that Norris should have just let him go straight away and then fought him for the race win. Do you think McLaren would have called the fight off if Norris had swapped earlier? Or do you think he would have been free to race to the end?
Based on how they've behaved to date this season, I think they would have let him. They would have let them fight. I think they would have been very clear. You can fight, but don't muck this up. We're in 1-2, which they've done before. Make sure you definitely are able to go for position. They've been pretty respectful with each other while fighting previously. I think they can be trusted. I think they would have been allowed to, and I think that probably would have given Norris a better shot at the win, perhaps. I was half expecting to be a little bit cheeky and sort of let him by and tuck up behind him and have another go through turns 1 and 2 maybe. But I do think they would. I think they would have let them fight. I think perhaps Norris wanted to prove he was the stronger at that point in the race. He was pulling away. He was making clear arguments over them. I think he didn't it wasn't as much as a Rubens Barrichello situation where he just sort of pulled over at the last minute.
I thought he was going to.
Yeah. But I did think it was definitely like proving himself that I would have won this race. I was the faster in the stint. The thing about him not moving out of the way, I think, takes a little bit of the shine off Piastri's win. And I kind of felt that a little bit from Piastri at the end. Maybe he's just a little bit more downbeat than most drivers. But the fact that kind of it was very clear Piastri was the slower of the two of them in that last stint, and he wasn't able to pull up to the back of Norris and kind of say, okay, I'm here now, let me through, did make it look a lot more like Norris was giving up a win that he claimed for himself in a way. So, yeah, kind of one of the most somber post-race moods I've seen in quite a while, but I still think he earned it.
Yeah. Kevin says Lando should have been pitted after Piastri, and then we wouldn't be talking about this. That's exactly the point I'm making, Kevin. That it's the mistake from the team. But counterpoint, Lando was quicker than Piastri in that final stint. Now I don't know how much of that is because Oscar didn't need to push because he knew he trusted the team to make the swap back. But Norris did seem to have the upper hand in pace from the timing screens only. We can't read everything into that in that final phase. So it may well be that you're right. We wouldn't be talking about this, but we might have been talking about an epic battle from the McLarens for the win. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a big fan of team orders. I sort of get Ant Davidson's point that he made in his post-race analysis that if you look at a tax return. Yes, we're going there. These drivers, in the UK tax at least, are employees of a team, so you have to do as you're told. I don't always like team orders, but sometimes I think it works that way. But what goes around comes around in Formula One sometimes. Not always. There'll be plenty of fans out there going, hang on a minute, sure, that's not true, but sometimes it works out that way. Ruby says, I disagree, not a Lando Norris fan, but compromise is ask Lando to let Piastri past once he gets within 2 seconds, which is undercut territory. Oscar win is tainted. I think the whole thing's a little bit tainted. I do agree it's taking the shine off it, Ruby, but the other thing I would say is that, again, is Oscar pushing? Has Oscar been told to save tyres and not push hard because the swap is coming? I'd like to have thought we'd heard that radio, though, but Lando was kept being told to look after his tyres but kept pushing, so we'll never know ultimately. But I think in the end it feels like the right decision, but I really hope that for Lando Norris' sake and McLaren's sake, we're not looking back and going, actually, that clearly wasn't the wrong decision with the benefit of 6 months of hindsight. But I'm not convinced Verstappen's going to lose this title. Red Bull possibly, but not Verstappen. Random Bosman, thank you very much for your super chat. Says Lando, I do know what he is doing, or I don't know what he was doing as well. Should have returned the place immediately or win and face the noise later and stand on business. He did neither. So caught in two minds maybe there, Random Bosman. Matthew, or Lando was. Matthew Brown, thank you for your super chat. Says this just might be the race where Max will start to wonder if Red Bull is really where he wants to remain. Or throw that hand grenade in there, Matthew. Look, I get that they probably went over the top on the radio, but this car isn't getting better. And Wingcap as well, thank you very much for your super chat. Says Eric Van Haren told Verstappen that the medical delegate should check him again. Verstappen let them send that medical delegate to the stewards, see if they are okay. I'm completely fine. I assume something was triggered on his on the G meters with his bounce. We'll get to Verstappen in a bit. But yeah, no, I've not got really anything to add on this other than because obviously I tried to waffle through it while we were sort of battling the technical issues, Stuart. So I've not got much else to say. I did see some people saying in chat that you're catching some flack on social media for daring to have an opinion that may differ from somebody else's. So I don't know if that's something you've said on the stream, but yeah. I don't think I've got nothing really to add, but I think both drivers, I will say this again, because I don't know if you heard this, Joe, but I think both drivers drove exceptionally well today, and that car is looking pretty special at the moment. So I think we're all in agreement that they've got a shot at this Constructors' Championship, and it's really spiced up this season. I know we said it the other week, but it really has.
100%. And I'm here for a sort of shift in the balance of power. I think if it had come a little bit earlier, then we could have had like a full-on championship battle on our hands now. And really, we haven't quite got onto Red Bull yet. But I'm really interested in sort of where they think they are positioned right now, because Verstappen's doing his damnedest with a car that may be worse than we think it is. But yeah, having these two essentially in the best car in the field, winning races together and doing well, I think it is going to bode well for the whole rest of the season.
I'm really excited for it. I think Spa's going to be great next week. And I actually, potentially controversial opinion, I actually kind of hope that Red Bull are fastest in Spa, because I would quite like that kind of season where we don't know weekend to weekend who's going to have the best car. So maybe Red Bull are quickest at Spa, McLaren at Zandvoort. Maybe we get a surprise from Mercedes at Monza or something, or we get another crazy Singapore where Verstappen and Red Bull are nowhere, but all of a sudden Ferrari, please, have a really great weekend. And I'd kind of like that kind of season where it ebbs and flows a bit between the teams. I don't want just one car dominating, but at the same time, if McLaren were now to start dominating, which I'm not saying they will, but if they did, then things are going to get interesting, aren't they? But looking forward to it. I'll read a few comments from chat, the good ones, not as in that agree with me, but that are not sniffy for no reason. I know everyone's in a mood, just generally in F1. I've got, I'm angry about all sorts of things, but Ruby says, Sean, we're not aligned in that hope of yours. What, Ferrari? Yeah. Are you looking forward to next year, Ruby? Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari? Are you getting a taste? It's not good fun, is it? Perez being 7th proves he does not deserve that seat. We'll get to Red Bull in a moment. That's from Dwayne. CPB says, I'll be honest and controversial after today. I wouldn't be shocked if Lando's manager was on the phone to Toto Wolff for a seat next season. Stop it with the hand grenades, chat. I'm not having it. That's a twist, wouldn't it? Merc are faster than Red Bull now, says Nick Surface. Maybe at certain tracks. I'm not sure overall if all things equal on a track that suits all cars. I know that never happens in F1, but they're close. Mercedes are in the mix. We saw that the slightly cooler temperatures today than earlier in the weekend. I think they were slightly cooler today. Not by much, but seemed to work. But I mean, Hamilton drove well today as well, but we'll get on to him in just a second. I've heard rumours Red Bull are closing down the Marco loophole. We'll get into that Red Bull in a bit. In fact, they're going to avoid the Red Bull comments now. We'll just have a look for other things. Yeah, for some reason it's mostly Red Bull. We're talking about McLaren and all that controversy. I don't actually think now that people have calmed down. I think actually what has helped the situation, as often is the case with socials, not so much here because I think everybody here has got a brain, which helps. But that was a bit harsh. But Sean moaning about people being snippy, then he gets snippy himself. But no, I think what helps is that picture there. For example, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, shaking hands, smiling. Lando said in his post-race interview that what cost him the race was his start and not having to give the place up. I think that helps calm things a little bit. And people seem to not be quite so moody about it at the moment. It'll be one of those things we look back on, kind of a bit like the Austrian one, actually. People won't like this at all, but look back in a few weeks and go, not that big of a controversy, really, was it? When you look back at everything else going on in that race and everything else that happened in F1, but at the time, it's easy to get a bit about it all. But yes, DJ Red Raven says, friendly reminders to stay hydrated. Of course, yes. I've still got my fan on, so again, someone said last week they couldn't hear it, so I've left it on today, so hopefully it's all okay. But yeah, should we roll on to Mercedes? Apologies for all the waffle, but a lot to try and get through. We'll take your questions later as always, but they are the top three as well. Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton P3 today, kind of involved in a couple of things, Stuart, but actually overall a relatively quiet race compared to what was going on ahead of him, but drove well again today. I've not got much of my notes. Pitted first time at the end of lap 16 for Haas. Seemed like the right call at the time. Great defensive driving in their first battle versus Verstappen. That was for the fight for P3. I think it was in the second stint. Pitted at the end of lap 40 for new hard tyres. That was a long way to go. He was concerned. I think the tyres were falling away at the end. A big picture there of a big lockup from Lewis Hamilton whilst battling with Verstappen, and we know that there was then contact towards the end of the race with Max Verstappen. We'll discuss that contact when we get to Verstappen. I think that's the best time to do it. But I think other than that contact with Verstappen, the defensive driving largely, I think Hamilton just drove well to a very strong P3 finish. A P3 finish that I think if you told me I predicted in P3 on Thursday, but after practice, I didn't think on Friday that Mercedes were really in this. I thought we were looking at McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari, and then Mercedes if they were lucky. But actually, a really strong result. And I feel like if Russell had started higher, I think maybe Mercedes were the third best team this weekend. I think really good drive from Hamilton today. Again, it's good to see Mercedes in the mix. I'll say that.
Yeah, it really is, honestly. I think they'll be breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief from both cars. I think it was quite clear throughout that they were, well, Hamilton particularly, even though on the radio he's not always to be believed about this kind of thing, but he was struggling a bit with maintaining the tyres. It's weirdly one of the tough ones on tyres this race, even though it's quite slow. It's always very, very hot, and they don't have a lot of straights. They don't get a time to cool down a little bit. They're often in traffic. They're constantly doing work, turning corners. But yeah, he was struggling, maybe overcooked the tyres at the beginning of his second stint, the hards a little bit, which allowed Verstappen to close up and start fighting with him. But I think he did some pretty decent defending, I must say. I don't think he, as far as I can see, overstepped the mark particularly, pushed Verstappen a little bit wide in turn 2, but no more than Verstappen did on lap 1. So I think just kind of elbows out, aggressive racing. Got himself in a bit of a tangle with Verstappen on lap, I want to say, I can't remember which lap, towards the end, when Verstappen drove into him. But which I think was a bit of a racing incident, I will say. I think it's just one of those things that happen. I think a bit aggressive from Verstappen, and Hamilton was already sort of turning in. I think a bit of desperation going on 2 cars just kind of meeting at the same point. Quite lucky, actually, in that point that he also didn't get damaged and get taken out or get a puncture or get suspension damage. So to come away with a podium after a race where I think he probably felt like he was struggling, really, really good for Hamilton. Another podium, and actually both Mercedes and Ferrari outscored Red Bull this weekend, amazingly.
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to think about his race overall. He was the McLaren saw him as the threat, didn't they, to that 1-2 finish, which actually maybe says a lot about where Red Bull's pace was actually today. Thinking about it, yeah. But they saw him as the threat for quite a lot of the race for that to break up that 1-2. But really, apart from the scraps with the defensive driving with Verstappen, which I really enjoyed that first one, then the second one, which ended in the collision, he very much needs to have that P3. Or at least a top 4, let's say. Because, if that collision doesn't happen and Verstappen gets through, then it's 4th, isn't it? Which I still think is a good result when you consider everything else across the weekend. But I think he had a top 4 position pretty solidly nailed on, just from being there, using his experience and getting on with the race and letting everybody else fall out over the radio and implode. And I think that's kind of my overarching point there for Hamilton. It's not to say that he didn't drive well and that it was an easy thing to do, because it wasn't. Fighting Verstappen or fighting any driver isn't easy, but fighting Verstappen for P3 when you know that he's already a bit tightly wound, so you've got to be careful in that situation. But yeah, no, I think Lewis drove well today, and that's really all I've got in my notes for him, which is a shame, because it's one of those things that I hate it when sort of a driver finishes top 4 after a good drive and some good defensive driving despite the struggles on the tyres and the big lockups we've seen a few times. That all I can say is they drove well. I kind of wanted to say more about it, but what can you say? I can't just sit here and talk about I like the jumper he was wearing the other day. Something like that. I don't know. But yeah, on the other side of the garage, though, George Russell. I'll tell you about my Russell notes. You'll love this. I wrote down on lap 10 up to PX by lap 10, because by lap 10 I wanted to see where he was. I don't know what that PX is because I never completed it, and that is all I have on George Russell, other than to say that he started 17th and finished 8th, which is a very good drive. Did he one stop in the end? Or did he? No, he did 2 stop, didn't he? I did wonder if they might try the 1 stop with Russell, but he did 2 stop in the end. But I think a good drive from Russell today to get back from what was a pretty disappointing qualifying, understatement possibly there.
Yeah, I mean, the strategy kind of fell apart in qualifying. Overused tyres, wasn't out there when the track was at hottest, and started 17th. But to come up to do through to 8th, 9 positions gained, pretty good going, especially when in the middle of the race it seemed like they'd kind of mucked things up a bit. And because him and Perez kind of were having a similar story throughout the whole race, really. They started kind of together at the back and were running together for most of the race. But yeah, it seemed like they weren't getting much pace out of the hard tyres, particularly compared with cars around them. And when they came into stop, there was a big, not a queue of traffic behind them, but like bunched enough that they lost basically 9 places coming into the pit. So it seemed like they were going to be stuck in this kind of like back of the field, working their way through, dropping back again. But to actually kind of solidly kind of shimmy their way back up to P7 and P8, I think they can come away happy with the way Sunday went, even if Saturday was a bit of a disaster for them. And I think Mercedes will be thinking that this was a day when maybe we could have got 3rd, 4th, or 3rd and 5th, and just a lot more points and just kept ourselves closer to the tight end of the championship. So some missed points today. but I think they'll be happy with how Russell's car went today. I think he drove strongly, if semi anonymously, really. They did get stuck behind Tsunoda for a fair part of the first stint on those hard tyres, but did make it past you eventually. So yeah, 9 positions from where he started, a couple of points, fastest lap, 20 points for the team. It's not awful, is it?
No, not at all. Not when you consider some of the struggles they've had only a few months ago, really, or even weeks ago, you could argue. So, really, really good from George today. And I think also important I think you were right to make the point as well in the middle of the race. Perez as well. That bit with Tsunoda tucked in that traffic. It looked like they were going to try for one stop because they've messed up, and then actually, as it turned out, they had the pace, didn't they, to get those points between them. Perez 7th, Russell 8th, different teams, of course, but still points there. But just we've not talked much about the incident with Verstappen. We're going to get to that when we get to Verstappen, so we're not glossing over that and giving Hamilton a pass and. If you think that I'm giving Hamilton a pass because I'm British and he's British, then you've not been here long, and I'm sure someone in chat will explain to you that who I support. Plenty of ties, but yeah, we'll get onto that shortly. Although I will say I did really enjoy 2 things today. Nico Rosberg talking about drivers turning into and not turning into corners, and Max Verstappen talking about moving under braking. I did quite enjoy that. I was like, oh. Really interesting. Anyway, so sorry to gloss over Mercedes a little bit there. We're going to come back to them though when we talk about that incident with Verstappen, and Russell, I think, drove really well. So that's about all I can say on him there. So we're going to skip through the images and get to, and this is nice, Stuart. This is really, really nice. I'll enjoy this. Ferrari, 3rd best team today. Probably more because of what happened ahead, I don't know, but 3rd best team today, which I'm still going to take as a Ferrari fan. Carlos Sainz was first on my list for some reason, so I'll start with him. He finished 6th today from 4th place on the grid. Poor start actually and dropped down to P7, but did get past Alonso a few laps in to take P6. Both Ferraris actually, Leclerc and Sainz, were kind of in the mix for quite a while in the race. They were sort of in that, do you know what I'm going to call it? The George Russell Austria position. They were both in the position for a good chunk of that race where if something happened ahead, they were going to be there to capitalise on it. So there was always a chance there for Ferrari. That kind of fell away a bit with Sainz getting, his strategy maybe not working out and falling away in the end. But Charles Leclerc only 4.8 seconds off a podium. He drove well as well. He did say on lap 21 to think about plan C. This is Ferrari. I'm looking at Ruby again. Get ready for this next year. I don't know what plan C is. Plan C could be a 1-stop, a 2-stop, dry tyres on a wet track, or wet tyres on a dry track. I don't know what plan C is with Ferrari. So I'm guessing they were going to try the 1-stop, which didn't really work out. He did pit twice in the end. Actually only a couple laps later on lap 23 for hards. A bit of a slow stop at 3.2 seconds and pitted at the end lap 40 for new medium tyres. Long way to go, but he made them work and he made them last. So good tyre management there, and good driving from Charles Leclerc, and not far off a podium. So I think a better weekend from Ferrari overall, although Sainz hasn't been too bad as of late. But I think looking at the team as drivers only, a far better weekend from Leclerc than perhaps we've seen in recent weeks with, again, the dry tyres on a wet track and some of the weird calls last time out as well at Silverstone. So pleased to see him getting a top 4 finish, obviously. I'm very happy to see Sainz up there for a good haul of points for Ferrari, but that doesn't actually stop them dropping below McLaren in the Constructors. That's a point to make.
Oh, yes, indeed. Which I think has been coming for a long time, to be honest.
Yeah.
They've not been as fast as McLaren, and I think they're just the head start they got at the beginning is now worn away. But yeah, a solid day for them. I think they've been struggling for a little while now. The developments they've been making haven't been going as they wanted, and I think today was a good haul of points from a good starting position. I mean, you said earlier that you thought Hamilton was basically locked in for 3rd or 4th this race, but Leclerc was making himself known for a good solid portion of the middle of this race. He was on the back of that Verstappen Hamilton battle. He wasn't that far away at the end, really, from 3rd place. He was chasing it down. So, he was definitely making his presence known. He could have had a podium today if things had gone slightly differently, if maybe Hamilton had suffered a bit more from that incident with Verstappen, or if their battle had slowed them down a little bit more. So, yeah, to be on the fringe of a podium, to be threatening that kind of position, I think is good for them at this point in time. It's. I think at the moment they seem to have been quite quiet. They're not like talking up big talks. They're not talking wins and titles at the moment. I think they're just doing that thing where they've actually got their heads down and are just working at moving forwards and delivering the best races they can. And I think race wins will probably come later this year. But yeah, I think good for them. I think quite a quiet race generally. I think Sainz did some sort of decent passes in the first stint to get past people on the weird strategies. But yeah, I think they'll be happy with this.
Thank you, Ruby, for your super chat. Says, because she likes me trying to get this out every stream, LH is the GOAT. Meeting me must have made the difference. Did you meet him, Ruby? That's awesome. Oh yeah, you were at Silverstone, weren't you? I think you said on Twitter. So that's awesome. Hey, I had a great time. I'm a bit jealous. I wish I'd gone to Silverstone, but yeah, thank you for your super chat there, Ruby. But yeah, no, I think I mean. Red Raven says, I think that sums up Ferrari beautifully. They made their presence known. That kind of is how it felt. They're kind of in the, like I said, the Russell position, wait and see if something happens, and then if it does, they can capitalise on it. But I'm happy as a Ferrari fan today. It's not a win. That talk for a few days of a championship fight appears to have gone. Although Leclerc still feels they can catch Red Bull in the... To be fair, I don't want to get too excited as a Ferrari fan. They are 16 points behind McLaren, who are actually considered to be in a fight with Red Bull. So if Perez doesn't start delivering and Sainz and Leclerc both find form and Ferrari sort their problems out, you never know. You never know. It's not going to happen, but you never know. Let me dream for a moment. Let's see what you're saying in chat. Before we move on to the rest of the field, let me see what you're saying in chat. Ian said Ferrari had the race of all time. There you go. Notte said Ferrari having the same pace as Mercedes and Max was a nice surprise. Just the being in the mix, to be honest, was a nice surprise. It also was not a complete mess up. I take that. Yeah, no, that's true. They didn't mess it up too much today. I do think it's pretty cool flex that even when they weren't on speaking terms, Lewis always sent Nico's kid presents for his birthday and Christmas. Has Nico Rosberg interviewed Hamilton? If so, I need to go and watch that after the stream because I don't think I may be wrong, but I don't think that's happened before. So that could be interesting. Yeah, I don't think I've never seen it. Is what I would say. I don't know. He's never ever. I'm sure they've spoken, but I don't know if they did on the done an interview together before. So I might have to keep an eye out.
He was doing the podium interviews, wasn't he? Does that not count? Or you talk about?
I don't know. I mean, on Sky, just sort of away from everything and sat down. And but I suppose he's done the podium one, so that counts. Unless that was the point people were making, in which case I just don't know if it would be cool to see them sort of sit down and have an interview on Sky. And do you know, actually, maybe it's after Hamilton retires. I quite like that as a feature. Sitting down and discussing 2014, 15, 16 as teammates, the championship fight, what that all meant, how that all kind of came to a head behind the scenes, what it did for their relationship and where they are now. Just because I'm just nosy like that. I guess I'll have to wait for an autobiography for that, but that'd be quite a cool interview. Maybe in Lewis's final season, whenever he decides that maybe that's when they'll do that. But yeah, anything else in chat? Obviously, as always, we'll do Q&A a little bit later, so if there's anything we've missed or you want us to talk about again, we can do. I will say as well to anybody listening that's just tuning in, Stuart apologises. I apologise as well for the technical difficulties. Stuart's on his phone. He's calling from London, which is very exciting. That's a whole other world from wherever I am, north, south, east, west, wherever I am. So, apologies for that, but it happens sometimes. We're here, and that's the most important thing to talk about all of this. Thank you for your likes as well. We're on 126 likes, 644 over here. Please do leave a like. That'd be massively appreciated. Really helps the channel in the algorithm, and it's free. I keep saying that because everyone else starts saying it on YouTube now. It's free to subscribe and to hit the like button like anybody was charging before. But it really does like crazily help with the algorithm. So I appreciate that. And thank you to, if you have subbed, by the way, and I don't give you a shout out here, it's not shown out on my feed, but thank you to Oshan and to Ovidox for your subscriptions. So please do subscribe, and I'll do some shout outs for subs a little bit later. Subscriptions are always appreciated. Again, they are free. That's the YouTuber spiel. Red Bull. Yeah, so I'm not going to say again. I'm not going to say the point again about how look where we were a few months ago and look where we are now, because that's just crazy. I can't keep making the point, but I'll read you my notes for Verstappen first. He finished 5th. He is with the stewards at the moment, or we're waiting for a decision on that. I assume that conversation is over and they're just waiting for a decision, so I'll let you know when that comes in. We've just got infringements for lap time. So he finished 5th. If he gets a 5-second penalty, or a 10-second penalty. Anything more than 1.724 seconds, and he will fall into 6th place behind Sainz, which will take 2 points off him in the championship. So just bear that in mind. I have got a graphic ready for that if it does happen, if I remember to change it, which I probably won't. So he finishes 5th on the road, could be 6th. Perez today 7th, but Verstappen overtook Norris off track at turn 1, lap 1, was told to let Norris back through, and did so on lap 4. Felt he was forced off. Verstappen fan here. I think that's a stretch. I'm not really sure. Other than turning in and hitting Oscar Piastri, there's not an awful lot that Norris can do. But 3 into 1 doesn't go, as Martin Brundle often says. Asked the F2 boys yesterday. So I think you could probably, by the definition of the phrase "forced off," you could argue that Max Verstappen was forced to go off track because Lando Norris couldn't turn into his teammate, but that is not a penalty. That is never going to be a penalty, and you're never going to be able to use that argument to defend overtaking off track. So technically speaking, yes, Max was forced off track, but not because Lando Norris turned his wheel left and tried to send him out into the barrier or anything like that. So no, that it was right to give the position back. Probably should have happened sooner, but you know, I do sort of agree with Max when he says, let the stewards make a decision and tell me to give the position back, and then I'll give the position back. I do sort of agree with that, but you also have to think the other argument is, if he then sits in 2nd place holding up Lando Norris and actually he does have to give the position back, is that fair? Again, life isn't fair, so I get that. But that I thought that was going to be his big controversy of the day. Turns out not. He wasn't thrilled over the radio today, which is not a great surprise. I want to talk more about that in a minute. I'm not going to read what I wrote in my notes. Actually, no, I won't read that bit. He said for example, he said over the radio, lap 18, can't brake, enter corners, front and rear. Said that was bad. 3-second stop for hards on lap 21. Then lap 34 went for a move on Hamilton around the outside of turn 2, got on the marbles, ran wide, and Hamilton got back through in what was a really fun battle, like I say, for P3. I've written here, and I don't consider this swearing, some might, so apologies, but pissed off on the radio about strategy, felt others undercutting him screwed up his race. I'll save that last bit for a little bit later. He pitted at the end of lap 49 for mediums, rejoined in P5 behind Leclerc and Hamilton, and then of course at the end there, I've got no notes because it was all kicking off. There's a picture on screen of it there. Went for a move on Hamilton into turn 1, got it all locked up, contact, went a little bit airborne. Didn't damage his car as much as I thought it was going to damage his car. Actually, thought that might do some suspension damage, but he kept going, got it across the line in P5. His argument is that Hamilton was moving under braking, which was what made me smile a little bit, was, okay, Max. But, I mean, you watch the replays, and I watched the analysis from Ant Davison afterwards. Lewis Hamilton, he does, by definition, move under braking. I don't think particularly aggressively, but he does. But I think Anthony Davison is right when you watch particularly the overhead. Hamilton does appear to sort of turn in a little bit earlier than maybe he would have done other laps. That's his prerogative, of course, as the lead car in that situation. And Max has gone in all locked up and there's been contact, and he's decided it's Hamilton's fault. I don't think Hamilton said an awful lot. I may have missed it. I think Nico Rosberg and others have called it a race. I think you called it a racing incident, Stuart. But I think I'd be surprised if the stewards don't apportion blame there. And if they do, I think it's only going to go one way. Whatever people's opinion of the incident, I think if they do give a penalty, it's only going to one way. I don't see Hamilton getting a penalty for that. And for those who make the comparison to Austria, let's not do that. It's a completely different situation.
I think so. A couple of things there, I guess. 2 or 3. The start of the race, where he ended up running wide and sort of scurrying off and coming out in 2nd place. I think there's a couple of things there, actually. You can see why Max would be annoyed, and I think this is a classic situation that always happens with the 3 wide overtakes, is that the cars on the outside cannot see the cars on the opposite side. They can only see the car in the middle, the car next to them. So Piastri has no idea in pushing Lando to the edge, giving him like room, but not a lot of room. He's actually essentially forcing Verstappen off the other side, and Verstappen has no idea that the person forcing him off is Piastri, and their actions have nothing to do with each other. They can't see each other. They're only viewing their actions through Norris. So I can see why Verstappen might be a little bit feel like he's being a little bit forced off track. On the other hand, I do kind of agree with what Norris said on the radio, which is quite early on into this happening, Verstappen decided, well, I'm going to be forced off, so I'm just going to put my foot down and drive as fast as I can off track to get myself on track as far up as I can. I do also think Verstappen did that, which was a little cheeky. Not the worst thing you can do, but I think that he definitely did commit to going off track and picking it up later. And if you check the stewards' notes, it was confirmed that he would have been penalised if he hadn't swapped back. They did find him guilty of getting an advantage off track. And with the incident with Hamilton, with the lockup, I do think it's a racing incident because I just think it's sort of, it's all right at the limit. Drivers are making sort of decisions at the last minute. It was very like the more marginal bits of Austria between Verstappen and Norris, but the other way around. Lewis did squeeze him sort of a little bit and then started committing to turning the corner. And I think it's very hard for Verstappen to say sort of he was turned in on when he's barreling way too fast and locking up his brakes into turn. Well, like he wasn't like he had positioned himself and was aggressively sort of overtaking into turn one. He was out of control by that point, and partly because he'd been moved onto the dirty part of the track and was having to like shift his position a little bit. I understand that there was some squeezing going on there, but I think there is an element of the Verstappen school of overtaking of, if you don't give me room, we're both going to crash. You decide what to do with that. There has been an element of that. And again, I don't like in Austria. I don't think it was an outrageous version of this. I don't think he was as aggressive as he used to be. I just think it was very much like he made a big deep lunge at the last minute and it didn't work out for him, and Hamilton just started to turn in and there wasn't any space and they hit each other. And to be honest, I'm very glad it didn't come to two cars being knocked out of the race. So yeah, I think racing instant, but obviously I think Verstappen more at fault there. I think he was more out of control, and I think it's likely we're probably going to get a penalty for him, which will drop him down just a single place. I think he was the one out of control. He was the one locking up into turn one. I think Hamilton's moving to a more marginal. But if they did say Hamilton moved a bit, Verstappen locked up a bit, they were both sort of not completely in control and causing it together. So we're just going to call square on that. Then I would be fine on that. But I think, this is leading into something I said on Twitter, I think, which got people a bit annoyed. I still think Verstappen hasn't quite got the wheel-to-wheel racecraft of some of the better drivers when he doesn't have a distinct car advantage. I think he is more like, I'm going to hassle my way into this, and you're going to have to deal with where I position my car. I think he's still in that kind of mindset, and sometimes that doesn't work for him, and he has to deal with the fact that sometimes that won't work, and sometimes he'll be hassled off track, and sometimes it's going to cause a collision. If that's the way you're going to go racing, there's more likely to be risk involved, and I think he has to cope with that. But it was interesting to see. I've forgotten his name now, but his race engineer,
Giampiero
sort of
Lambiase,
finally lose patience with him. I think.
Go to your room.
Yeah, he kind of lost it a little bit early on when he was complaining about being hassled off at turn 2 by Hamilton and just kind of very quietly like, I think you were behind at the apex. And then later on, calling his moaning childish. And it was interesting because we know, as with a lot of drivers, Hamilton does it as well. Verstappen does a lot of moaning down the radio, and I think they have the relationship where they can deal with that. And he gives us good back, and they just have, they've worked at that being able to work. But it was interesting. It kind of seemed to reach a point now where it was kind of like, okay, stop now. Let's stop.
They've got the kind of relationship where they can get angry like that with each other and then probably sit down afterwards, debrief, and then go for a beer kind of thing, and that's it. It's all line drawn under it. Let's move on to the next one. A bit, not the same thing, but kind of. I mean, Bono said it after Silverstone, didn't he? When Hamilton comes over the radio and says, "Shut up," effectively, leave me alone. He knows just right. Hamilton's got this. Unless I need to tell him something, I keep my gob shut. There's so many different dynamics in race engineer and driver relationships that we'll get into another day maybe, but they're fascinating. But overall, I think the whining over the radio, Stuart, it really pisses me off. I'm not going to lie. It's just some of it is so... And I know, and do you know what? If we'd have had team radio broadcasts 20, 30 years ago, it's probably exactly the same. I don't think it's this era of drivers or anything like that, but it's just the... I always do it, and you know what I'm going to say, but it's jumpstart Norris. Like, oh, shut up. If it's a jumpstart, they'll pick up on it, and if it isn't, they won't. Just be quiet, George. I've made a concerted effort, I think is a phrase, in recent weeks and months to not bite, but I'm going to answer 2 points in chat. Nick says, so dive bombs are illegal now. If you can go to the point in the stream, Nick, where I specifically say dive bombs are illegal, I will end the stream now and delete the channel. I never said that, and I am all for a dive bomb. One of my favourite modern day, without feeling too old, moves in Formula One is Daniel Ricciardo's dive bomb in China on Valtteri Bottas. I absolutely love that. That's how you do it without a collision. That's about respect between two drivers. It worked. And Dell says, how is it completely different? Because Max is perceived to be the aggressive party here. That's the only difference. No, the difference is Lewis Hamilton did leave a lot more than a car's width, and Max Verstappen did not leave a car's width for Lando Norris in Austria. Whichever way you look at the regulations, the white line defines the track. He did not leave a car's width. That's why they collided. That is why this is completely different. The reason I'm addressing that, Stuart, and the reason I'm frustrated with that is because Nick and Dell are two of the long-serving people on his channel who have always got great points, and I always respect, and they seem to respect me, and I would expect they'd know that that's not what I'm saying and that they shouldn't be putting words in my mouth, and they know how much that frustrates me. But I also suspect that Dell likes to wind me up sometimes, so possibly he knows he's pushing the buttons. I don't know. But yeah, it's no disrespect to either of them, but that's the point. That's what I'm saying, why you can't compare this to Austria. 2 different tracks. One of the drivers is different, and 2, Hamilton has left space. Yes, he's turning in, but he's got to turn in at some point. It's a right-hand corner. I know Nico Rosberg likes drivers to keep going straight on at a right-hand turn, but Hamilton's got to turn in at some point. So there's going to be contact if Max comes steam at the inside. So nothing wrong with a dive bomb, but if you're dive bombing and your front wheels are all locked up for whatever reason, then you're out of control. Whatever that reason is for being out of control, you are. So that's going back to what Stuart said. And it's the point I was making. If you have to apportion blame, you can call that a racing incident, but if you have to apportion blame, I do not see how Hamilton gets a penalty there. If there is not a car's width, then maybe it's a different conversation. In fact, it probably is a different conversation. That's the point. So I have no problem with dive bombs. You know the move, chat know the move I mean about Ricciardo and Bottas in China. It's one of my favourites. That's the one that coined the phrase lick the stamp and sent it, I think. Brilliant move.
Yeah, that was when he was on. He switched to some soft tyres, was moving up through the field, and Bottas was his last fray. That was for the win, and he threaded the needle into the hairpin. And you know, I think similar to Hamilton, Bottas was sort of moving across a little bit to squeeze the gap, and Ricciardo, who, you know, it's easy to forget these day and age, was the master of late braking, judging to perfection how to outbrake someone into a corner. Yeah, that was great, and I think. You know, it was tricky circumstances today. I think Mr. Verstappen's balance was off. You know, tyres were being tested today, and he was on a slightly dirtier part of the track than he would have hoped to have been on, and it just got a bit out of control. I don't think it was intentional. I just think it in terms of how it all played out and how it was judged, it was slightly on the wrong. It's tricky with these things because, as you say, it's if you have to apportion blame, it was sort of Verstappen who would kind of misjudge things, but it wasn't. We're not saying he was outrageous or he's out of control and he needs to be banned and all that. I think it was just an error, and it happened to go wrong for him today.
Well, the move wasn't out of control, but when he got double locked up, that's when you're out of control, isn't it? Because you can't steer. So that's what I mean by out of control. Not like he was 32 car lengths back and just didn't bother braking. That's not quite what I mean. But I think one thing that a lot of us will agree on, some might, but I think most of us will. I do think I agree with a lot of drivers. And I don't like saying this phrase, but I'm going to say it anyway. I agree with Helmut Marko. We need to let them race. I think we are over-regulating some of this, and I think there needs to be let them sort it out themselves. You've got to step in at a point, because if you just let 20 drivers racing in Formula One just do what the hell they like, we're in trouble. But I think some aspects of it are over-regulated, and I think we need to, just let them get on with it sometimes. But other times, you've got it. You have to step in. You have to. Of course you do. But otherwise, it gets silly. But Yeah, Ruby says not a Max fan, but yeah, still not a Max fan. When other drivers do to Max what he does to others, he doesn't like it. He had attacked well before that. Thank you very much, Ruby. Everyone knows Ruby. Alex, thank you very much for subbing. And Sabra, I see Sabra Cadabra, nice, for your sub as well. Don't forget, if you do sub today, I'll give you some shout outs. So thank you very much, everyone, for your super chats and your subs. The other thing I do want to make very... do people mind if I swear? Because I want to read this exactly how I wrote it down in my notes. Stuart might know what's coming. But if people are offended by particularly the F word, I'll kind of, yeah. But I'll tell you what, we'll do that then. We'll replace the word friend style. We'll replace the word F with puppy. Crofty can puppy off with his needed a better night's sleep puppy bull spit narrative, because it's just the Sky bias at the moment. We were talking about this, Stuart, absolutely reeks. And this whole argument about Max Verstappen staying up till 3 a.m. or whatever doing sim racing is why he was the way he was today is bollocks. Yes, he had the dominant car, but Max Verstappen was literally winning world championships whilst he was doing sim racing. Yes, again, he had the dominant car, so maybe he wasn't in wheel-to-wheel action, but he wasn't as arsey on the radio then. He was peed off today, quite frankly, because his car wasn't quick enough. He couldn't keep up with the McLarens, and he was annoyed at the strategy, as most drivers would be. But Max Verstappen, and I am being a great Verstappen defender here, so fair enough, but whatever. Max Verstappen is one of those drivers who will vocalise that over the radio very loudly and make his point. Other drivers will go, we'll talk about it later, and just sound really mardy about it, or Charles Leclerc's a good one for that when he gets in the pits and sort of says, oh, we'll discuss it later. But Max Verstappen vocalised that, and that comes back to that relationship we're talking about, Stuart, with your engineer. He can do that with Lambier and vice versa. They'll get away with that, but other engineers might not like that. So that whole narrative from Crofty was beyond pathetic and just reeked of the bias that channel is full of at the moment. And to kind of steal your phrase, Stuart, so apologies, I'm not sure how they'd have coped between 1997 and 2007 when no British drivers doing particularly well, apart from maybe David Coulthard. I just thought the whole thing... I get the argument. Jonty made the argument to me that actually you've got to look at, as an athlete, good night's sleep, plenty of water, hydrated. I get that, but come on. It's such a crap narrative. Just looking for an excuse to dump all over somebody that you don't like, and I can't stand that just generally. So looking forward to Harry Benjamin in a few weeks' time again, frankly. But sorry. That had to get off my chest, Stuart, because it's the one thing that's really wound me up all weekend, despite all the controversy and drama we've had. That's the one thing that's really, really got my goat. I don't know why, it just has.
There's also a little bit of an element of kids today on their phones, man, it's rotting their brains. Video games are making them. Yeah. It's all that kind of like, he's seeing something he doesn't understand. And it's also, when he goes sim racing, everyone knows he's sim racing because it's public. Like, they know what he's doing. Yeah. But, who knows what the other drivers are doing up till 2 a.m. Maybe they're getting a good night's sleep. Maybe they're up watching the Queen's Gambit. On Netflix. We don't, not sponsored by Netflix. We don't know what they're doing. It's just because we can see what he's doing that they can sort of nitpick at it, and it hasn't held him back before. And I think if the team decide it's holding him back, then they'll have a discussion about that. But I think Crofty's just being crafty.
You're much nicer than I am about it. Well, on the off chance Max Verstappen's listening. Max Verstappen is not listening, but on the off chance he is, before Belgium, Max, on Saturday night, in bed for 7:30, please, pop an episode of CBeebies on, something on there, nice glass of warm milk and get some sleep, and then hopefully you'll turn up on Belgium, win by 40 seconds, and then Crofty will moan that F1's boring because you've won, and he'll show no emotion when you cross the line. But anyway, it's just a pet peeve. You can call it bias if you want on my part as well, but I just find the whole thing silly, and it just is crazy. But... I don't know. Fair. I just had to get it off my chest. I had to. And your drivers complain because they're frustrated, and Max is frustrated. But one question in chat, Stuart. One word answer if you can. If you can't, that's fine. But if you can, I've lost who it was. Quite simply was, do Red Bull have the fastest car or not? From Bertram.
No.
I would agree. It could end up being track specific, but we'll see.
Incredible though. That's where we're at right now. Who would have thought that at the beginning of the year?
Yeah. Although I will just read this one. Sorry, I have to read this one as well because exactly. The Hap Rust says James Hunt laughs in cocaine, nicotine, and champers for breakfast. Exactly. Thank you. Sergio Perez. We're not going to go in on Sergio Perez today because number one, Stuart, I said it in the qualifying watch along yesterday. I think he was actually just very unlucky in quali because, as we saw with George Russell, he caught that. Another day, Perez catches that. It's just a run of luck. It's a damp patches on the track. Drying track. He's just the wrong plate. He just caught it completely wrong. Lost his car. He's not gone in too hot. He's not gone in all locked up. He's not done anything stupid. He's just gone to turn in. Damp patch has caught him out. He's spun, hit the wall. So I feel for him there. Just one of those things. Again, as I said yesterday, it never rains, but it pours. But actually today, to be fair to him, I think he drove very well to get back up to P7. We said yesterday we thought around P8-9, didn't we, in the chat? So P7 is a really good result for Perez, all things considered. Actually, at the moment, only 2 places behind Verstappen. That could be 1 place if Verstappen does get a penalty. So not terrible at all from Perez, but to also be fair, I guess is the point. Still not good enough. That qualifying thing was critical. If he qualifies higher, he's in the mix at the front. Red Bull might have options versus McLaren, whereas today, because he's out of the mix, it's 2 against 1 again at best. If you want to put Verstappen in that fight, it's 2 against 1, and that's just not going to work for Red Bull long term. So good recovery, all things considered, but I still fear for his position, I guess is really my point. All I've got in my notes is poor start and drop to 18th. On lap 10 was P11 through the pit stops. Pissed the end of lap 28 for medium. Surely has to stop again, question mark. And of course he did to make that second stop. So again, I'll repeat the point to lead into your counterpoint or anything you want to say, Stuart. I'll just say it again. All things considered, good recovery, but I'm still not confident that he's particularly securing that seat beyond the summer break. He needs a good Belgium.
Yeah, I think I'd be very happy with how today went. Particularly, I think it was as good as he could have hoped for. I don't think there's anything else up for grabs without, retirements ahead of him. Kind of did exactly what the team wanted. At the beginning, before the race, Christian Horner said, this is the kind of day where we expect a monster drive from Sergio, and that's what we got. And I also tend to agree. Yesterday was unfortunate. It was the kind of situation where damp drying track, grip levels unclear, where he just got caught out. And as an isolated incident, it is one of those things where you just go, yeah, that is a real shame. It could happen to anyone, I guess. It's just because it's part of this series of failures or misfortunes or things happening that it's sort of like, what is it all adding up to from this driver? And it's not the thing we see happening to Verstappen, for example, or, other drivers particularly. So there, the question mark over him does continue to grow, even though he delivered today in exactly the way you wanted to. And, there's a good possibility they will finish together on the timesheet, as you said. So we've got one more race before the summer break. And I think it's imperative he delivers in qualifying, he delivers in the race, and we go into that break with Perez on a high. So his graph is pointing upwards, not pointing downwards. And maybe that'll take some of the heat off him, because I think traditionally some of the sort of final major parts of sort of silly season and driver changes and seat confirmations take place in the summer break, and we get some things cleared up before we come back. So, I say this, he is signed up for next year, obviously, but that hasn't stopped the question marks and hasn't stopped even people from Red Bull like Christian Horner saying he's got to back up because it's not safe. So, yeah, I think he's got to get Belgium spot on, I think. And hopefully he can do that by backing up Verstappen and maybe helping him deliver a win or at least as high a position as he can possibly get. If he can play his part in the team and prove himself, however that works, then I think that's what he needs to do. But today he delivered everything they needed.
We have a decision. Belgium's going to be interesting, by the way, just to come back. That's going to be really fascinating on what they do after Belgium. Because I think somebody made the point, I think Nico Rosberg made the point, who is the option? Who can you guarantee is going to get in that car and do better than Sergio Perez? And I jokingly said my dog, but I didn't mean that. In response, I didn't mean that, because it's not as easy as hopping in. Liam Lawson, a lot of pressure. Daniel Ricciardo, controversial opinion, think if Daniel Ricciardo's the answer, you're probably asking the wrong question. Given his form of late, I think, I'm still not convinced he'll do much better, if any better. But then others have said that Daniel Ricciardo in a stronger car will probably be a better driver overall. So, counter that with that if you want. But we do have a decision on Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton. Max Verstappen has been banned from F1 for 37 years. No, he hasn't really. No further action is the ultimate decision. The stewards heard from Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, the team representatives and all of that jazz. On the approach to turn 1, both Hamilton and Verstappen overtook Albon. Hamilton returned to the racing line before the braking zone and commenced to turn into turn 1. Verstappen approached the turn faster than on previous laps due to DRS and braked at the same point as previously. The driver of car 1, so Verstappen, argued that Hamilton was changing direction under braking. Hamilton stated that he was simply following his normal racing line, which was confirmed by examination of video and telemetry evidence of previous laps. So that point we made earlier about possibly turning in early, not true according to their data there. It was clear that Verstappen locked up both front wheels on the approach to turn 1 prior to any impact occurring, but missing the normal cornering line for a typical overtaking manoeuvre. Hamilton stated this was a racing incident, whilst the driver Verstappen argued that this was a case of changing direction under braking. How interesting. The stewards do not consider this to be a typical case of changing direction under braking, although it is our determination that the driver of car 44, so Hamilton, could have done more to avoid the collision. Accordingly, we determined that no driver was predominantly to blame and decided to take no further action. Is that a contradiction from what I read? The stewards do not consider this to be a typical changing direction under braking, although it is our determination that Hamilton could have done more to avoid the collision. Accordingly, we determined no driver was predominantly. I suppose they've said about Verstappen being locked up, haven't they, as well? So maybe not. But key word again there, predominantly. So no driver is predominantly to blame. Therefore, they've decided to take no further action. I think on our conversation, Stuart, when we look at the points we're making about the move, the Hamilton possibly turning in earlier, although again the data says that wasn't the case, and Verstappen maybe braking later, although again the data says that wasn't the case. He braked at the same point, just got locked up. Maybe racing incident, no further action is probably reading that document. On balance, that's probably the right decision. Looking at the incident without any other information, you could make the argument for a penalty one way or another, but probably more towards Verstappen, but they decided no further action. I think that's probably on the balance of things. Again, with all the information, they've got more data than we have watching on TV. They've got all the angles. They've said there that Hamilton turned in at the same point he did previous laps. Verstappen braked at the same point. It was just faster because of DRS. When you take that all into account, then maybe it is just a racing incident. I know they say they don't take, the outcome into consideration, but maybe the fact that Hamilton continued and it did nothing to him and Verstappen ultimately cost himself a place, maybe they just thought that was enough. But I don't think they count that. They say they don't count it, but I'm not 100% convinced, if I'm being honest. I sometimes feel like human nature would just subconsciously make you do that. But anyway, do you agree with the decision, Stuart, before I start waffling on something completely random on that?
Yes, no, I agree with basically everything you said. I think it's very interesting, the key things there, which I'll say again. I know you just said it, but basically they entered the corner very similarly to how they've always entered the corner, Verstappen being a little bit faster maybe, but they turning in at the same points, braking at the same points. It just, on this occasion, ended up with some locking up. Maybe if Hamilton had reacted faster and jumped out of the way slightly, but I think that's what they're sort of getting at. But otherwise, yeah, it does sound like nobody did anything crazy. And it's just the sort of thing that happened. And I think... yeah, I agree essentially, and it's interesting. I heard Hamilton say it was a racing incident in the press pen as well. So I think, as I said earlier, if this is what they say, I think I tend to agree because it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything particularly out of pocket, really.
I'm not saying he was the guilty party before anybody starts, Ruby. I'm looking at you. But I do tend to find in my experience that the driver that said it wasn't a racing incident is probably feeling a little bit guilty about things that happened. I'm joking. I just think, if I was in Hamilton, it was a racing incident. But no, it was. It's one of those that if you had to apportion blame, and if I was a steward and they said you have to give a penalty to somebody, then I would probably give it to Verstappen over Hamilton. But ultimately, we'll not get back into it again, but I agree. Again, for the millionth time already in the last 3 minutes, you have to remember that the data the stewards have compared to what we have. We've got a few replays and Ant Davidson poking on a TV screen. That's all we've got. That's not an added option, by the way. He doesn't turn up to my house and start poking my TV screen. I meant the SkyPad. But yeah, Ruby says Hamilton has so much integrity. So there we go. There's that argument as well. But should we move on? That's all. I'm sure that social media will completely draw a line under that, and everyone will be perfectly happy that the stewards have made the right decision, because as we know, throughout F1 history, they are excellent in their decision making.
Exactly. Thank goodness for them. Thank goodness we can all move on.
It's taken us an hour and 25 minutes to get through 4 teams, and 2 of them we glossed over quite quickly. So we're going to fly through the rest of these. And this, I can promise you, this will not take long. RB. Great drive from Yuki Tsunoda, 9th place. If you want to talk about races up until sort of late on when Lance Stroll closed in, that were a little bit, not anonymous, but slightly lonely, Yuki Tsunoda's felt like it, because every time I looked at the track map, he might have had a Russell or a Perez behind him, but he wasn't largely all that close to anything in front of him, and it was really just faster cars that seemed to be catching him and going past to get back into position. Yeah, it felt like he had quite a lonely race, but I imagine from his point of view, with Russell there and Perez and Stroll coming back later on, it was probably quite an exciting race for him. We'll look for his press release in a minute, but he finished P9. Great job from him. I said finally pitted end lap 29 for Hards, going to the end question mark. He did go to the end, so great tyre management as well, considering this was, I don't think Pirelli were even considering a one-stopper before this race. So that is fantastic tyre management at the end from Yuki Tsunoda. And actually, I will say this as well. Yuki Tsunoda's last lap was a 1:24.7. Lance Stroll, who was on much fresher tyres, did a 1:24.4. That's only, only is a lot in F1, but that's only, considering the tyre life and the management he was doing, 0.3 slower. So that's pretty competitive speed. So great stuff from Yuki Tsunoda to pick up a couple more points for RB. And Daniel Ricciardo, I'm a little bit disappointed today, actually, because he started P9, didn't he? And I thought he had a shot at points today, but ended up P12. He did pit twice. I have absolutely nothing in my notes, so I'm going to check and see if they've been really kind. Thank you, by the way, to Jack for your PayPal contribution. Not a PayPal contribution for ages. I think you missed a couple of noughts off, though, mate, but I'll still accept it. Thank you very much. It says Crofty has a bedtime of 8 p.m. drinks Horlicks, and wears a nightcap and slippers like Ebenezer Scrooge. So there we go. Thank you very much, Jack, for your PayPal contribution there. It's sort of a super chat, isn't it? Nothing from RB yet. I'll let you know if that comes in. But have you got anything in your notes specifically really about Ricciardo? But I think overall for RB, great drive from Yuki.
Yeah, I found Ricciardo to be the most.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
Did you go weird?
Just went out. But yeah, I got disconnected. Yeah, Ricciardo I think was more anonymous to me than Tsunoda. Had a very strange short first stint. Didn't seem to get into any particular incident, but yeah, just kind of poodle around and not delivering a race. I mean, Saturday was better, but not delivering a race that says, "I am ready for Perez's seat. Give it to me." If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, I know that RB is a bit touch and go with how it performs from race to race. It's still a pretty good car, but I think he's been a bit quiet about it. But we know that's his angle right now. He's like, they want to get rid of Perez. I'm the guy, not Tsunoda, not some other guy, not Sainz. I'm bring me back. I'm ready. And it's not that kind of drive that speaks to that necessarily. A bit of a strange strategy, not that similar from Tsunoda's, except he had an extra stint on the front. But Tsunoda in particular, I'm particularly impressed with. He kept faster cars behind him, even though he was stretching out the medium tyres. He avoided an entire stop altogether and kind of basically spent the entire race in ninth, as far as I could see. Just kind of steadily
in that zone
got on with things, which was great. And RB have kind of maybe fallen back a little bit from where they were earlier at the beginning of the season, when they were pretty strong and delivering points pretty regularly. But I think this is still a reasonable day for them.
Yeah, the only thing I will say, I'm just looking through sort of some of the lap charts and things, but I think Ricciardo's strategy was one of those that I raised an eyebrow on, because he started on the mediums, didn't he? And then they pitted him with the soft runners pretty much at the same time, cover off from undercuts. So at that point, he's just out of sync, isn't he, at that stage? Because, put him on the mediums, start him and on those, and then bring him in with the soft runners when he should be running longer. That's going to hamper his strategy. So that's probably part of it there. And there was that, I think, look, I'm trying to think back sort of from memory of the track map, because I've got the driver tracker up. So I think there was a period in the race where he was part of that kind of gaggle of cars with, I think it was a Haas in there and a Williams and a couple of Astons, and I think maybe that's cost him time now, which ultimately made the difference. And of course, as you said there, like we already touched on, if Yuki saved himself the time for a second stop, then that's probably contributed some of that. But I mean, he was 20 seconds up the road from 25, 26 seconds up the road. So maybe, Ricciardo was there for points, but Ricciardo had a shot at points today. So maybe strategy is what, that's what chat's saying basically. Yeah, sorry. I wasn't reading chat. I was reading the lap things. Chat basically saying the same. Yeah, strategy was pretty much screwed him. Came out in traffic. Dim Glow says Daniel got screwed over. Daniel had the worst strategy today, says JDM. Daniel got screwed by strategy. They put Dan the lap after the soft runners and just tracked him behind slower cars. There we go. That's from Warren. So, not his fault that he's in that position, but it's just what I mean by disappointing is not disappointing in him, just disappointed he didn't get the points, because I thought that, especially this upturn in form he's apparently having, would have been nice to see him up there with Yuki. But I think he was ahead of Yuki, wasn't he? Because he started ahead of him, so maybe would have been in that fight for 9th, 10th place. But I think. Not terrible for RB overall. It's a couple of points in that really tight fight with Haas, and probably had the strategy been better, Ricciardo might have picked a point as well. So that could have been 3. So maybe a lost point today. We'll see. I'll see that press release comes in once we've run through the rest of the field, because that might be interesting what he says. But that's kind of where we are with RB. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll P10, Alonso P11. Again, it was one of those races where a lot of the focus was at the front and what was happening there, so I've not got huge notes. Just unavoidable, unfortunately, for a race reaction. If we were still doing the Monday ones, I'd have had a whole day to go through and get all the quotes and everything together, so I'd have more to say. So there we go. That's just a symptom of doing the race reactions. Alonso, I've got no notes on, except that he was thoroughly miserable. Another one that joins the not overly happy club, but I think they made the point in commentary since he signed his contract. Things haven't really gone brilliantly, have they, Aston? So I'll have a look. I have got their press release. Hold on in a second. Lance Stroll, lap 12, Stroll was running soft longer than Alonso, but lap times were really strong and competitive compared to those he was racing. So that's got to be said, including those who had already stopped. Pitted end of lap 14 for mediums, but was a slow stop at 4.1 seconds. Slow on the left front, and that good work that he did on the softs, that longer first stint, undid. That slow pit stop undid all of that good work. Lance Stroll said it was a difficult race for us. I don't think we optimised the strategy and we were not competitive enough. We struggled with tyre degradation too. We've got a lot of work to do as a team head to Spa next time around. Fernando Alonso says, unfortunately, we missed out on the points today. Didn't quite optimise our race. We pitted quite early, and from that point on, we had quite a long race ahead managing the tyres. It's the first long distance we've done with the new package, so we need to go and analyse our new updates. And Mike Crack said we leave Budapest with a hard-earned point, but there seems to have been potential for slightly more today. Lance and Fernando drove well, making strong overtakes across their stints. The focus now shifts to Spa. Yeah, I don't think either driver drove badly. I actually think Stroll was... I wouldn't put him in the category for driver of the day, but I think he had a very good drive. Like I said, that first stint and the lap times he was delivering was solid. In that final lap, for example, he was 1.3 seconds quicker than his teammate. So, no, more than that. No, it wasn't. He was 7/10 quicker, sorry. I'm reading the wrong one. 7/10 quicker than his teammate. So, no, it was a whole second. Sorry, I was right. A whole second quicker, sorry. For one reason or another on younger tyres, to be fair. But, good pace from Lance Stroll to try and make that work. But ultimately, the slow stop cost him there. But anything on Aston, Stuart, that I've missed that is going to be really interesting to talk about?
I mean, I tend to agree with Pierre Crack, who was basically like, there was potential for more. As a team, interesting... them and a couple of other teams, I think Haas as well, they didn't leave themselves with that many mediums come Sunday and sort of decided to focus on a more soft-based strategy, which to be fair did work for Stroll, but in a track where they know it's very hot, very hard on tyres, just sort of giving yourself a soft tyre starting strategy seemed a little bit odd. Again, I'm not sitting here with the models and data in front of me. It just seemed confusing. But I found it very interesting. Stroll, you said he went longer, but he went basically twice as long as Alonso did on the soft tyres. So a shame the pit stop didn't quite work out for him. But yeah, potential for more. It's interesting. He's not gone full GP2 engine about it, but Alonso not very happy on the radio. Not angry, not moaning, but just kind of like, it's not. You know how he is. You know where we are. I'm doing my best, but he's not as punchy as he was when the car was working, and he seems but he's signed up with his team for a couple more years, so he better stick it out and get on with it. But yeah, not particularly happy right now. He's kind of got a bit of a Perez, as you say. Yeah, signed his contract and then all went wrong.
Yeah, the only saving grace, almost, I suppose, for Fernando is that at the moment, if you're not going to get yourself in a Red Bull, a Mercedes, a Ferrari, or a McLaren, Aston Martin, with what they're planning for the future and some of the appointments they're making, is quite an exciting project to be part of. So, and with Honda coming in, so maybe he can focus on that. But that doesn't help him this year or next year, of course. So I can understand why he's a bit meh. But yeah, just overall, sounds like they were frustrated and didn't optimise their race, is what Aston Martin is saying, really. But it is still a point on the board for Stroll. So it's something after what's been a tricky phase for them, understatement possibly of the year. Nico Hulkenberg was P13 today, Kevin Magnussen 15th. The only notes I've got for Haas was that Hulkenberg pissed at the end of lap 2 for hard tyres, having started on the mediums. So I'm not sure why they made that decision. I don't know if he had damage from any contact or anything like that turn 1, or whether they just wanted to get rid of the hard tyres. I'll see if Haas have got their press release out. They haven't indeed, excuse me. Just have a quick drink. Nico says it was a poor start and a pretty bad first lap that caught us out and put us on the back foot, and we don't have track position, which is it's all about here. It's very difficult when you're running behind in dirty air. You have to try something and push your luck, and an early stop was the answer to that. We then had 2 huge stints to do with hard tyres, and we knew that would be challenging as we couldn't make the tyre last long enough. Over 1 lap we were pretty much competitive, but over long runs not so much, a bit like Monaco. So the early stop was to try and get some undercut done effectively, is what he's saying there, and it did. I suppose it sort of worked, didn't it, in a way? But yeah, and Kevin Magnussen says we rolled the dice a little bit with the soft tyre start, which a couple of others did, and I gained a lot of positions on the first lap, got overcut by a few cars, and ultimately we didn't have the pace today to fight for points. I feel we could have done better in qualifying, but looking at the pace today, I don't think we were running in the running for points today. And Ayu Komatsu, tough afternoon. Kevin had a pretty decent first lap. Nico lost positions in the opening lap. Needed to get Nico back into the points and try something different, which is why they had the early pit stop, pretty much saying the same thing. I don't think it worked really, and when you see competitors execute a brilliant one-stop strategy finishing in the points, we need to look into that. So there we go, and then obviously on to Spa, hoping things are better there. For Haas, I'll fly through these, Stuart, and then I'll let you do your bullet points if you've got any for the teams, because I've not got much here, so I may as well. Williams, Alex Albon, he finished 14th today. Logan Sargeant 17th. Albon said on the radio on lap 28, he was told that they were moving to plan B, but he then said he didn't appreciate it because the tyres are gone, and said, quote, "We are too indecisive." 4.9 second stop for Albon as well at his second stop on lap 29, which is going to cost you a lot of time. And Logan Sargeant, I said it yesterday, I'll say it again, why not? Overall, I think this weekend he's had a pretty strong weekend, all things considered, when you think about where he's been at times. He wasn't a million miles away from Alex Albon in qualifying, and he finished fairly well behind him today, but still, yeah, like I suggested, I think he could win the World Championship, probably still wouldn't save his seat. So I think that's pretty much done. Albert says, need to understand what happened today. I think we missed it a little with the strategy. If we didn't come out behind Fernando on the first stop, we would have been fine. But as he was playing the team game and helping to back us up to Lance, it impacted our race. That's interesting. So here they were playing the team game there. Planning the... Oh, Red Bull, why have you done that then? Sorry. I just got the Red Bull email whilst I was reading the Williams one, and it overrode it for some reason. That's annoying. Damn you, Red Bull. Wanted to do the 2-stopper, then changed to the 3, so started to push the tyres. However, we reverted to a 2, so that's what he was complaining about over the radio. So they were 2 stops, then they said to 3, then they decided to go back to the 2, so he's already in his tyres at that point, so that's why he was frustrated, and the tyres were gone. Logie Sarge says, today was okay. I was disappointed with my start, and around here, it is an uphill battle from there. From a pace perspective, it was a good day overall, apart from my start. I'm happy with my weekend. Car felt better here than last year, which is a positive, but it was a difficult race. Final point he made, did my best to come back through as best I could. We tried with aggressive stops, but it didn't really work out, and we found ourselves in dirty air. So that is what cost Williams today. Sauber. I'm sorry. Every week. Sauber, Bottas started 12th, finished 16th, and Joe started 18th and finished in 19th place. I'm hoping Pascal's here to let us know what's happened now. We have got the press release through for a change, actually, which is interesting. Bottas wasn't enough action around us to make anything out of the race. Sometimes you got a bit lucky with the tying of blue flags and lost some time. And lost some time as a consequence. His main issue is still the lack of race pace. No great surprise there. top 10. Didn't have enough pace to make top 10 on merit. The straightforward race we had in the midfield, we couldn't go anywhere. And Joe says, this weekend has shown that our one lap pace made a step in the right direction. However, we don't see the same in terms of race pace today. My race was compromised after the first stop. The early stop was to cover our rivals and protect Valtteri, but it didn't work out as planned. Had to manage tyres, lonely and uneventful race. And then on the upgrade package, says the new upgrade package on Valtteri's car indicates progress. We still struggle with high fuel loads, and neither of us had a chance to make it into the points. Still struggle with high fuel loads. That's a problem in an era with no refueling, isn't it? For Sauber, hope they can get on top of that one. And Alpine were there. Ocon,
were they?
For some reason, it might not. I'll read you my notes. So Gasly, starting the pit lane after making changes. I think he took some new battery or something. Pitted to retire in the end of lap 34 with a suspected hydraulic leak. Ocon started 19th, finished 18th, and I've just written I don't know why. So Ocon 19, there you go. I'm sorry, Alpine fans, but I don't remember seeing Ocon at all at any point in that race. So there you go. Stuart, have you got anything in your notes about those teams that is going to enlighten me and make me really excited about how amazing Ocon was today in particular, or a Sargeant, or even a Hulkenberg?
Possibly. Well, while you were talking about Haas, I remembered one thing I did enjoy and didn't say during the Aston Martin thing was I enjoyed Alonso hassling his way past Hulkenberg and then Stroll immediately jumping all over the back of him and fighting him and passing him the next lap. I enjoyed that. That was good fun. Yeah, I think it's interesting, Albon calling out the strategy live on air. That reeks a very sort of Ferrari-ish kind of behaviour during the race, and I think maybe they need to get more on top of how these strategies are going to work before they implement them and not change their mind. Because Albon was essentially saying, well, I've ruined these tyres for the strategy you now want to move me on to, which is very much the kind of thing that Leclerc and Sainz would be moaning about in the past couple of seasons. Logan Sargeant, second fastest lap of the race.
No.
There you go.
Oh, see that.
It was because he switched onto the softs at the end, but, not to be sniffed at.
Go Logie.
Yeah. 2 tenths behind Russell, so there we go. Clearly, sign him up for another year, Perez.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Nothing on Alpine.
No.
Nothing at all.
Just suspected hydraulic leak for Gasly was a retirement, and like I say, Bottas, yeah, nothing on Sauber either. I feel awful, but Pascal's here. Hey, Pascal, thank you for your super chat, mate. Appreciate the support. Pascal was in Hungary this weekend, Stuart, so I hope he's had a great weekend. Very jealous. Sat opposite the Sauber garage on the pit straight, so binoculars out, gave us all the goss. It says, Greases from the Hungaroring. Was great to be at an F1 race again, had fun. The tough day for Sauber, but at least I saw Bottas doing a few overtakes on the main straight and something to cheer about. So there we go. Thank you very much, Pascal, for your super chat, your support, and I had a great weekend. Very jealous. That's Hungaroring, the Red Bull Ring, Spa, there's some of the races. Zandvoort as well on my bucket list for F1 because I'd love to do them. So very jealous. I had a great weekend. Thank you to Rix as well for your super chat. Says, sorry to jump in late. Is there any more sour feeling first win, or it's just Oscar being cold Aussie? Do you know what, Rix? I'm going to come back to that in a moment. We'll do Q&A because I think we're pretty much through the field now. So, yeah. If you have any questions, please do drop them in chat. We'll answer a few now, ideally related to the race. If not, then we'll answer pretty much anything regarding F1 just for a few minutes because, we'll try and get to around the 2-hour mark as we tend to do. Apologies again for any tech issues we've had, but these things happen, so it's fine. We're here. That's all that matters, and we love Stuart, so it doesn't matter if he's on the phone whilst doing a skydive. We'd still be happy to have him here. Please don't ever do that. I'd be more nervous than you would be. That's that one, really. Please do drop a like. One away from 200. Come on. Who can get us to that 200 mark? Thank you to everyone who's tuning in today. Thank you for all your super chats as well. Subscribe if you're new, like I say. I'll do some shout outs for subs as well towards the end, so please do drop a sub on the channel if you're new. Lots to come this season, and indeed this coming week. We've got the preview for Belgium on Thursday. Saturday, I'm live with the qualifying watch along for Spa, and then on Sunday, I'm live again with the race reaction. Stuart's gone and got a life for a day, which I'm appalled at, and I'm going to be joined by Will for the first time in a while on Sunday. So there you go. Someone else who can tell us what they're thinking of the season. The only thing I will say is, like me, Will is quite sarcastic, so if you're not a fan of sarcasm, that might be one to miss. But there we go. Yes. Any questions? Then we'll do that Rix this one then, Stuart. I think that's fair. is there any more other sour feeling first win, or is it just Oscar being a cold Aussie? I was just going to say, and I said it to you, Stuart, actually, I think, Oscar Piastri is quite old school, isn't he, in his approach with the media? He's quite, not cold, but he's to the point. We heard it on the radio as well with the tyres at Silverstone. No, the medium is the best. He's very much to the point. Very straight talking. It's what I really like about him. It's why I'm quite an Oscar fan, because that's the kind of driver I like. Old head on young shoulders, as Martin Brundle would say as well. So I don't think it's a cold win in the sense that's, that he's cold towards it. Maybe it is part of his personality, but I think what takes the shine off it is just how it all came about. But as we said at the top, not a reflection on Lando, not a reflection on Oscar. The team put the drivers in that position and actually more importantly, put themselves in that position to have to make that decision. If they got their strategy right, then maybe we'd be having a different conversation. But I don't think it does feel a little bit tainted, or the shine's been taken off it a bit, but I don't think Oscar Piastri is going to worry too much about that. He's got that winner's trophy on his mantelpiece at home.
Yeah, sure, he seems like the kind of guy who has mantelpiece.
Yeah, Oscar mantelpiece Piastri. On his mantel Piastri, there you go.
I think at first I actually did think, everything seems a bit subdued. It's a funny atmosphere. It's not the, over the years we've seen a lot of first-time winners, and we've seen the whoops and the cheers and the screaming and the crying and all of, everything under the sun. And he didn't seem very much matter of fact. Yeah, thanks for that. We made it work. Good weekend. Blah blah blah. And very chill in Parc Fermé and all that. And I did think, maybe he's just like, maybe he's a bit annoyed at how it all played out. But I have a multi-viewer F1 open, and I'm not looking at it everything constantly, but it does have all the team radio kind of transcribed live as best as it sort of can going up. And you can't see everything as it goes by, but there wasn't a lot of chat between him and his engineer about the situation that was ongoing. So I don't think he was as aware to the argument that was happening up front. I don't think he knew he was sort of in the middle of this spat that was happening. And if he was aware, he'd have to assume that from the fact that Lando hadn't jumped out of the way immediately. So I actually don't think it probably had a big effect on how he would have taken the win. And we've definitely seen drivers whoop and cheer after wins that they've absolutely been given and had some dodgy circumstances. We've seen, Vettel seemed pretty happy after Malaysia 2011, I want to say, or 2013. So I think 2011 actually. But so I think this is just probably how he is. I think he's happy, but I think he's internally happy. I think I would be quite similar. I'm not a big whoop and cheerer and screamer. So I think a lot of the subduedness was us, and I think the commentary and the paddock and just the general, the people who had witnessed what had happened between Norris and the team and all that. But actually, I think Piastri is probably as happy as he's likely to be.
People can say to me, he reminds them of Kimi a little bit.
Yeah.
So maybe there's that. But just on the team radio thing, I do wonder if it maybe he wasn't as aware, but also perhaps even if he was, he strikes me as a sort of, I don't know, but he strikes me as the kind of driver that if they said Lando's not going to let you through, he'd probably say something like, maybe something along the lines of, in better words than this, I'm not happy, but we'll discuss it later. I don't feel like he'd go on a massive rant on it. He doesn't strike me as that kind of driver. Some drivers would, others wouldn't. Some would be somewhere in the middle, but he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's going to get too heated in the cockpit. But maybe we'll find out in a few races' time. Who knows? What I will say on this is, I think, and sorry to bring it up again, they've just annoyed me this weekend, so they're going to get it again. But I do feel like this is something that Sky will bang on about for the next 6 months relentlessly until the next thing happens between Norris and somebody. Had Piastri jumped out of the way to let Norris through, I doubt we'd hear much about it. But anyway, that's the end of that. AC, thank you very much for your membership. Sorry, 42 months, AC. Goodness me. Thank you very much for your continued support. It says end of Red Bull era ? McLaren World Drivers World Constructors Challenge 2025 ? Oscar 2025 Drivers Championship ? Will Lando leave McLaren if Oscar wins the World Drivers Championship before him? Who will replace Checo at Red Bull for 2024? Well, that's a lot of questions, AC. We won't get through them all today, but sort of maybe as an overarching answer for the McLaren ones, they're in a great position. We've all most of us have agreed they've got a very good shot at this Constructors Championship this year. So you're talking 2025. What about this year? That would be incredible. I think in a straight fight, all things equal, 2025, McLaren have a dominant car. I'd probably still give the edge to Lando in that situation, but I don't think Oscar would be far off a world championship if they had that kind of car in the future. It's an interesting question on if Lando was to leave McLaren if Oscar wins the championship before him, because a few people have pointed out today that maybe after all of this, Lando might put the call into Mercedes, but I think that's possibly the media and us fans maybe making more of it. I can imagine a situation where they get in the debrief, they say what they've got to say, get on the plane together, go home, and that's it. I suspect that's all it's going to be, and then they won't talk about it again until Thursday, and then they'll probably even say then it's all been buried. So, not sure. As for who replaces Checo at Red Bull, shrug. I'm not, 7th place today is a good recovery, but he, it still doesn't look great when you look at his season results. The run he's on, he needs an epic weekend in Spa. But I just feel like, I don't know what you think, Stuart, but I just feel like I think you touched on it earlier actually, that the way Red Bull are talking now feels very Gasly. It feels sort of, they're not saying we're going to get rid of him. They're kind of doing a thing, well, we'll see what happens next weekend and we'll discuss it over the summer, and maybe, he's in that seat for now and we've got a contract. There doesn't seem to be any definitive, we are right behind him, let's do this, Checo, let's go. It is all very, let's see what happens. And generally speaking, and I might be wrong, but generally speaking, when your Helmut Markos and your Christian Horners are talking about, let's see what happens next weekend and make a decision in the summer, again, maybe I'm wrong, but my experience says to me that means a decision, if it hasn't been taken, is pretty much there. Apparently Liam Lawson did his Silverstone test with them, or his filming day, and didn't blow them away with his lap times, but apparently he was close enough that he's still in the mix for that seat. But I don't want him in that seat straight away, Stuart. That'd be a nightmare for him. That's almost career suicide. But I just feel like if the decision hasn't been made, I think Checo would have to take pole and win by a margin on Sunday. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't think 7th place and then maybe a 5th or a 6th in Spa is going to be enough to make, especially if McLaren are winning races 1 and 2 for Helmut Marko and co to go, yep, he'll do. They might have to make a change. But then to go to the point, then I guess, Stuart, who is the change? Who do you put in Perez's place from Zandvoort onwards? Really?
I mean, that is the question, isn't it? Oh, I mean, yeah. If you think they're doing a swap out, a classic Red Bull mid-season swap out, then if it were me, because it's only half a season and essentially you're sort of, that second seat is like a real liability anyway. Why not stick in Tsunoda, see how he does? Why not test him out?
Yep.
I've been critical of Red Bull before, and I'd still think it would be a baptism of fire, because sticking, fresh drivers straight in against Max Verstappen and just say, good luck, you've got 6 months or half a season. But I think if you're going to be Max Verstappen's teammate, you do need to have a certain amount of fortitude, and I think that's the kind of thing that's sort of biting Perez maybe a little bit. I think if they put someone like Tsunoda in there, who is technically a junior driver looking to move up, and that's the whole point of that program, you may as well test him out and hope they don't expect miracles from him. But I think you might as well. I think Daniel Ricciardo is a tested entity. I don't think there's any need to kind of put him in there unless you kind of expect Ricciardo to immediately be on it and start, gathering up all the missing points that you need. And yeah, here's the thing: if they're thinking, well, who do we want for 2025? If we want to test someone for 2025, stick in a junior driver. If they want to maximize the amount of points they want to get for the rest of the season, maybe they do grab Ricciardo. Maybe they do say, look, we know you can race. We know if we put you in this car, you'll probably get a whole bunch of points, and probably not any worse than Perez. So it kind of depends what their mindset would be for the rest of this year.
It's going to be an interesting few weeks, isn't it? I said it in the qualifying watch along yesterday, that crash, the photos of that crash from Perez, I think are pictures we're going to see a lot in the coming weeks. Just a feeling I have. Again, for the third time, I might be wrong. It feels like he's going to have to do something special at Spa. I kind of like the point you made there, that if Ricciardo's probably not going to be any worse than Perez, why not just stick him in there and see if it does improve things? That's a good argument as well. But there's also the point that you could put Ricciardo in there, and if he fails over the next 5 races, then you've still got Tsunoda you could try. for the last few races, so they can move the drivers around freely, can't they? But I said it yesterday. I'll keep saying it. I would, if it was my call, which it isn't, but if it was my call, I would give Yuki that seat for the rest of the season, see how he gets on. If he fails, you can always drop him back in that RB because he's got the contract. If he's successful, you've solved your problem for a year or two. And then I put Liam Lawson in to replace Tsunoda, who's gone to Red Bull alongside Ricciardo, because then you've got, I guess, effectively a shootout for who's going to be teammates there with potentially Hadjar, if whether those two will be teammates next year themselves. I think that would be a good measure for Lawson. Just the idea of taking Liam, and again, this is biased, but the idea of taking Liam and sticking him in that Red Bull terrifies me, because I remember, as a lot of us will, what happened with Gasly, what happened with Albon. It was too soon for them, and they've both turned out to be very stellar drivers. But up against Max Verstappen in that Red Bull, that's a baptism of fire for any rookie, isn't it? So, which he isn't a rookie officially, because it's, he's been in F1 before, but he's not done a full season, so you know what I mean. But that's what I would do, but it's not my choice, and Red Bull have made some interesting decisions over the years. Vesk, thank you very much for your super chat. Says, get in there, Lewis. 200th podium, still we rise. Yes, podium number 200. I saw somebody say in chat earlier, will there ever be a quieter 200th podium for Lewis Hamilton, or a quieter podium for Lewis Hamilton? But actually, as a lot of you pointed out, there were things that happened for him, but I take the point compared to what was going on. Ruby says, I think they should put Bottas there. A bit uninspiring, isn't it? But no, Bottas is linked to Williams, isn't he now? I think Bottas is the favourite for the Williams seat because everybody else has been, so it's his turn. Just seeing what you say on that one. CPB agrees. Ricciardo could win a Grand Prix and get podiums if he's on good form. Lion says Ferrari is quite behind the other top teams. Well, it felt like that all weekend. And then, like I said earlier in the stream, actually, as the race went on, I felt like they were sort of a bit more in the mix and there to pick up the pieces. So I feel a bit happier as a Ferrari fan today overall. So, yeah. Oh, somebody said the other day, I will say this, somebody said the other day to me, it was in comments or socials or something like that, that they've noticed that I've sort of given up trying to hide any biases I have. And I think part of that is just because of age, and I can't be bothered anymore. But the other thing is because I must admit, despite what I've said in the past, I find it much more enjoyable doing these streams and watching the racing if I'm supporting somebody. Which surprises me. Plus, I don't think anyone can be completely unbiased. I think everybody has a bias. Even if you say, Jonty says a lot, I'm rooting for the underdog. I don't think Jonty has a favourite driver necessarily, but when you say rooting for the underdog, you are therefore having a bias, aren't you? But I just... I do go on about Michael Schumacher wing cap because he's the greatest of all time. Let's not get into this one. But yeah, no, I just wanted to make the point. It's just more fun, and I enjoy it. So I've got my favourite drivers. I've got my favourite team. Only one favourite team. So do you have a favourite driver, Stuart, or are you very much sort of, as long as they're not a dick, you don't mind them kind of thing?
I don't really, not right now. I think I'm a bit like Jonty. I tend to go for the underdog. So whoever's the chasing one, I'm like, yeah, go on. Because I tend to go for the chasing person. It actually made I would bring this one up. Abu Dhabi 2021 interesting because they went in with equal points, and I was like, this is really. I really went into the best man win kind of mentality there. But up to that point, I was sort of a little bit more Hamilton because he had a lot of work to do to catch back up in the points there. And I think did he win 3 races in a row to get that equal
something
points?
like that? Yeah, he got quite a run, didn't he?
Yeah, I was quite a little bit exciting. So yeah, I was kind of rooting for that a little bit. I just wanted things to be close. So it's going to be interesting. So like actually right now I'm like it's exciting to me that McLaren are doing so well. They're closing up this gap to Red Bull, and I'm kind of think that's an interesting thing to look for, and I hope that gap closing continues so it works towards something in the latter end of the season. If it kind of flips over, if they catch and pass Red Bull early on, then things will be maybe a little bit different. So yeah, I have liked some people over there. I've liked Mark Webber, I've liked Ricciardo. I don't know why Australians really come out to me. I like Piastri, but I'm not like a fan yet. I'm not like, Piastri. I was very into Montoya. I found him very amusing and interesting. And I think the fact that again, against you, I guess, he sort of came in and immediately muscled Michael Schumacher out the way. I found that quite exciting thing to do. That's really making a statement, isn't it? Yeah, he was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can't say I was a Montoya fan for some of the reasons you just stated. Weirdly enough. Ruby says, is Sean in his 70s? He brings up his age so many times. Well, is the argument physically or biologically? I'm 38. Mentally, I'm about 92. So maybe there's an average to work out there. I don't know, but no, not quite. Ruby says, guess who I like as well. I heard you're quite the Max Verstappen fan, actually, Ruby. Unsub. That's it. AC, thank you very much for your super chat. Says, put Ricciardo in Red Bull either to survive or sink. If he can issues solved for a few years, else they need to get someone from outside. Yep. Yeah, I think there's a lot of arguments for who could end up in that Red Bull, and I think you come up with lots of different. But the answer to Red Bull's problem, slightly longer term, as in from next year onwards, is funnily enough one of their former junior drivers who just so happens to be available, but because their daddies can't get on, they're not going to go and sign him apparently. So there you go. Let's not get into that again. Those 3 Hamilton wins in a row. 2021 was the last time he had 3 non-Verstappen winners in a row. Wow, from Clay. That's a stat. That's the last time we had 3 non-Verstappen wins in a row, 2021. Yeah, no, that makes sense, yeah.
You mean up to this point? Up to today?
This point, yeah, up to today.
Wow.
Wow, that's, yeah. Because he won, didn't he win Brazil from the back of the grid? Because he went from the back of the grid to about 10th in the sprint, didn't he? And then from 10th to win it was one of those big wins there. So, yeah, that's a stat.
Isn't it just? Okay, that's interesting. And here we go again, we're back. We're back, baby. 7 different winners this season. We haven't had a Verstappen win in 3 wins. That's great.
Yeah,
I have to clarify, not because I don't like Verstappen, but because I like to kind of break up a dominance a bit.
I like that.
You're coming to you, Sean. I think there's a tech issue.
Just collapsing mentally, it's fine. I do kind of, I like the whole 7 different winners this year thing, but I do feel like I need to be that party pooper that reminds everybody that Max Verstappen won the other 6. So he's still doing all right.
No one's won 2 races, have they?
Other than Max, no.
Yeah.
Yes, we had. Here we go. Top of my head, not even going to look. So we had Carlos Sainz in Australia, Lando Norris in Miami, Charles Leclerc in Monaco, George Russell in Austria, Lewis Hamilton Silverstone, Oscar Piastri this weekend. Who am I missing? Well, Verstappen. Yeah, Verstappen will be the 7th, wouldn't he? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, there we go.
He's so forgettable. He's already passed it. He's gone. We're in a post Verstappen era. Yeah, that's it. Apologies if anyone can hear any loud noises. There appear to be some fireworks going on outside for some reason. Got a bit of everything today.
Yeah, well, I had 20 to 11 last night. A load of fireworks went off and set the dogs off. And I'm not sure why. I think somebody was just celebrating the fact that it was Saturday. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I went Tom Allen with that. I just felt like I needed to for some reason there. But no, very weird. I don't know why that was. But yeah, I apologise for the fan earlier and I apologise for the dog yesterday. We've got my my parents' dog with us for the weekend as well. So that's fun. Anyway. Today's Lewis Max fight really reminded me of 2021, even down to the illogical Stuart decision, says Vesk. Red Raven, I'm starting to agree with your mental age of 92. I am sorry, but wow. Thanks, Red Raven. Love you too. Del says maybe Stuart is in Australia and they're celebrating Aussie P's win. There you go. You're obviously in Australia, Stuart. Calling Sydney.
That would explain a lot.
He's from Melbourne, isn't he? Is Aussie P.
I think. But don't quote me on that.
So yeah. There you go, calling Melbourne. Any more questions then before we wrap it up? Because I'm getting hot and Stuart's phone's probably baking his ear off. Are you actually holding it as a phone, or is it?
No, I'm using earphone things with
that's fine.
Microphones in.
That's visually be like literally on the phone, like burning your ear off. Where would Perez go if he gets dropped, says CPB? That's a question that doesn't get asked a lot, actually, to be fair. We forget about that. I would suspect he might get in the mix for maybe the Williams seat because he brings a bit of money for next year. Because they wouldn't, they're not going to say no to money and experience, are they? I think somebody said yesterday maybe the Audi seat, somewhere where he can go sort of away for next season to Sauber. Not a great car potentially, but somewhere out of the spotlight and rebuild from there. But I kind of suspect that if Perez gets dropped from Red Bull, that may well be it. His stock has dropped a lot. And also you have to think from his point of view, if you've been driving, you drove last year the most dominant car in F1 history. And all right, it's not a great car. It's not as good this year as it was last year, and he's struggling, but he's still driving a good car. Does he want to go and jump in a Sauber? I'm not really sure. So my guess right now would be he would maybe take a sabbatical, see what happens at Audi for the future, or see what happens at other teams. Keep himself available if, for argument's sake, whoever replaces Lewis Hamilton doesn't work, or if Lewis Hamilton has an absolute breakdown after working with Ferrari for 7 minutes and he needs somebody to hop in and save them, which I wouldn't blame him for. I think I'd suspect at least sabbatical, maybe retirement. I think, in fact, he said before, hasn't he, that he wants to race for wins and podiums, but he's not doing that in that car. So, yeah, maybe not. But maybe Alpine says KMS boss. That's a fair shout. They're looking for a driver, aren't they? So he could be a good shot alongside Pierre Gasly, and then when he starts running into Gasly, maybe you'll all back off Ocon a little bit.
That wouldn't be a bad shout. And we think Ocon's to Haas, don't we? That's what we suspect.
I think that's as well. What's the word people? What's the word people use? As I understand it, Ocon is going to be at Haas. Yes, as I understand it.
And if he wasn't, I think that's the kind of place I would have put Perez. That kind of like, he's a veteran driver with some good results under his belt, and will just happily sit in that Haas. That's just seamless to fit him. I mean, either one of those sort of midfield teams will just take a year off, and see if anything comes back to him. Do a Ricciardo maybe, and see if he's called back to save RB or something. You do get the feeling this Perez situation is holding up the entire driver market, don't you? People are just waiting to see if something that seat becomes available, and everything changes.
Well, Perez and Verstappen, but I think the Verstappen thing's gone quiet now because Helmut Marko has committed, I think the word is, to Red Bull for 2020 till 2026, hasn't he? So that seems to, according to reports and those in the know, ended the chance of Max Verstappen moving to Mercedes for next year because of the Helmut Marko clause. So it probably is Perez now, thinking about it. Yeah, it probably is Perez. And actually, Raul, as Raul often does, makes a very good point. He says he basically is a slightly slower version, or a lower version, of Sainz, but with lower stock, would help Audi with setting up operations. Red Bull is a well-run team. So that experience that he brings from Red Bull, plus everywhere else he's been, to Audi, or Sauber as they are next year still, could be an interesting argument. And if they're looking for a sort of Sainz-style driver with experience and some speed, yes, Perez's stock has dropped off and they can't get Sainz, then maybe Perez is the answer there. So that's a fair shout as well. So it'll be interesting. Vescas, did we do driver of the day? We didn't. So I'll tell you what, we'll end it there then. That's what we'll end the stream on. In chat, very quickly, one surname. Who is your driver of the day? I'll do a few shout outs. I'll also just quickly do any subs that have come in whilst we've been waffling away. Thank you to L-Dub. Love as well. We've done Sabracadabra, love that name. And thank you for all your super chats as well. I think, unless I'm wrong, it was Piastri who won driver of the day officially. Who you got, Stuart? Who would you pick out of all of those wonderful drivers? Apart from obviously Zhou Guanyu, who had such a great race. You can't pick him; that's too obvious.
Yeah. As I was just thinking about it, I was thinking, it's a tricky one, because I think it was actually a really hard day for a lot of drivers out there. I think a lot of them were struggling, and rather than sort of flexing and showing you they were driver of the day. But actually, I think by a margin, I think I give it to Piastri. I think he took the lead of the race, confidently drove at a pace that he needed to kind of, keep that race win in hand. Made a couple of errors, which before that last stint, he kind of lost a few seconds to Norris by going off track, and dipped his toe in the gravel once he in that final stint. So not perfect, but actually I think had a confident, managed race. Other than McLaren mucking up on strategy, he looked like the race win was securely his today, and he looked like someone who had won races before. So yeah, I'll give it to him. I think he deserves it. Yeah,
I know what you mean about the difficulty, because you've got Norris. Again, it was the team that put the drivers in that position and they had to make that decision. But Norris drove very well today as well. you could argue he might have had the pace late on to take the fight to Piastri. We'll never know, of course. But the reason that I would agree with you and lean more towards Piastri than Norris is just because in that early stage, pre-mistake, Piastri was looking pretty comfortable, wasn't he, and in control. So I wouldn't say had it in the bag. You never quite got it in the bag at 5 seconds or 4 seconds, whatever it was, but he looked good. So yeah, but I think honourable mentions, Lewis Hamilton, I think drove really, really well today. I think Charles Leclerc has got to be in there too. You've got, I think, whatever you think of the situation at Red Bull and Mercedes, you've got to give a nod as well to Perez and Russell for coming back through the field to 7th and 8th. Tsunoda making a one-stopper work is brilliant as well on a track where in those temperatures nobody's expecting a one-stopper to work, so he's got to get a nod as well. So it is tricky, but yeah, I think Piastri, again, partly bias, partly because it's his first win, however that came about, and also that first stint was pretty mega. First time I said that for a while, so I'd lean more towards Piastri, but I think there were some drivers in there who definitely deserve a shout. Ruby has said with a super chat, thank you very much, Ruby, for your super chat. Who do we think Ruby picks, Stuart, for driver of the day?
I think they praised Verstappen's cool head and tyre management and grace under pressure.
I'm not saying that Ruby's violent, but I feel like if we keep up with this, we're going to get a drink thrown at us at some point if we ever meet them. So Ruby says, Lewis Hamilton, driver of the day, also of the century, a.k.a. ever. Thank you very much, Ruby, for your super chat. And I'm sure you enjoy the banter, as the kids call it these days. We'll also just end this poll while I remember as well before I run through your driver of the day before we finish off. Rate the Hungarian Grand Prix, 45% good, 34% great, 15% average okay, 3% bad. I don't know if I asked you, Stuart, I said okay at the start. What did you click on the poll? I know you tend to have a quick vote, so...
I did click good, but if there had been something between good and okay, I would have clicked that.
Yeah, that's how I felt,
Yeah, I think it wasn't action-packed, but it had a lot of intrigue. The strategy was sort of building. There were things happening that weren't necessarily sort of moves on track, but there was sort of an undercurrent of stuff, I think, which sometimes you have, which sometimes races have, if not a lot, I would say.
Yeah.
An undercurrent of stuff.
CPB says, Oscar is sitting on top of the reef with Lola, brownie points for guessing the film. I want to say Shark Tale. If that's right, CPB, feel free to come round and slap me because I shouldn't be knowing that. But I think what you're referring to is Shark Tale. But let me know, and I get brownie points. But yeah, anyway, correct apparently. There we go. I'm a loser. Yinka says Hamilton for driver of the day. Alfie Alf says Stoff. Charles says Stoff as well. Thank you guys. Ruby says Hamilton. Alberto says Pastry. We'll not use his full name, not anymore. AJ says Piastri. Clay says Pastry. Vesk says Lewis, not biased. Smiley face. Dimglow says Hamilton. Warren says Piastri. Brad says Piastri. Red Raven. Pascal Verline. Yep, I'll stop there. I've probably just spoiled something for somebody, so I apologise. I should have read it first. Kaori, Hamilton or Piastri. Alberto, we said Hamilton. Random Bosman says Oscar. Pascal says Perez, starting his career at Sauber. Started his career at Sauber. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So return that. That's another good point, Pascal. Sorry, I read it as a driver of the day there. Joel says Hamilton. Growback says Hamilton. Pascal actually went with Leclerc or Stroll. Sighted Canvas says Johnny, my food delivery driver. Dude was super quick to get my food to me today. He gets my vote. Fair enough. Yuki Tsunoda doing a one-stopper for Marcelo. Let's do a few more. KMS Boss says Piastri. Raul says Leclerc or Hamilton. Oscar made mistakes. Lando got helped by Max and ran into people. Fair point on the Oscar mistakes, actually. That is a fair point. Yeah. I think Hamilton with his 200 podium says JS. Yeah. Norris for quick Scott D. That's pretty much it. So, yeah, there we go. Anything else you want to say, Stuart? I think we're finished, aren't we? I think we're done. We've got through it all. We've read the Stuart's decision, so that is the final race.
I think everything we said was correct and unarguable.
Yep.
So, yeah. I'll probably say one again for probably the sound of my end. I did the best I could. I hope listening to me sound like a potato was slightly better than forcing you to do the entire thing.
No, it's no problem.
Um,
Tech issues happen. We'll just pretend that we're in the 90s, which makes no sense.
At least we know we have this option if things go wrong again. I can just use my phone and we'll muscle through it.
Yeah. I'll put a filter on so we sound like we're having like a phone conversation from, like I say, the 80s or the 90s on the radio.
Yeah,
It could be fun. No, honestly, I appreciate you coming on, Stuart. I know it's probably a pain for you as well, and tech issues happen, but appreciate. Dell's just dropped some massive breaking news in the chat, which has made me go, holy crap, but I'm not going to get political on this stream, so let's not do that one. But yeah, thank you very much, Stuart. It's a pleasure, and I think you're not, obviously you're off next week. You've got booked a week off, annual leave, all sorted, but I think you've said possibly back for Zandvoort, so if that is the case, so we'll arrange that later. We've got a few weeks to sort that out, but have a great summer break. I'm sure we'll talk and enjoy Belgium next week without the pressure of having to listen to me for 2 hours, which is, you might never come back.
I will. Yeah, I look forward to Zandvoort. Have a good week without me. Yeah, and thanks again, everyone.
I will do.
And for being patient with me.
No worries. Thanks so much, Stuart, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry, I was trying to do two things there. It didn't work. I've got a new way of trying to end the calls on Discord, and I just failed miserably. Yes, thank you very much to Stuart, and thank you to you guys as well for tuning in. 388 of you still here. Before you go, please do leave a like. We're at 229. Any more will be massively appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you're new. Lots to come this season. As I say, preview on, that's the wrong screen again, Sean. That's the watch on screen. Keep going. There we go. Preview for Spa on Thursday. I'll be live, of course, for the quali watch along at about 2:30 p.m. BST on Saturday for Spa as well, of course. And then I've got Will with me for the reaction next Sunday, so very much looking forward to that. Can't believe we're in the summer break already. That is absolutely crazy. But yes, thank you so much for tuning in. Leave a like, subscribe, all of that juicy stuff. Thanks for your super chats tonight as well. That's fantastic. I was going to ask you something yesterday. I'm going to save it for next week. It's not important, don't worry. But it was just something that I wanted to ask when more people were here. So yeah, but hey, have a good weekend. Enjoy your week. And I will see you on Thursday. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.